You are watching On Demand. Please do not try to vote or enter any competition or other interactivity in this programme, as it may not count and you may still be charged.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks to our colleagues at STV as well. You join us as Britain wakes up to find out who will be getting the keys to number 10. Welcome to Good Morning Britain. Election 2015 and what's turning out to be one of the most dramatic election nights in a generation.
David Cameron is inching towards a possible second term as Prime Minister. Dozens of results are still to come in, but the Conservatives could gain a slim majority of 2.
It has been a disastrous night for Labour and Ed Miliband, particularly in Scotland, where the party has been almost wiped out by the SNP.
The Liberal Democrats are expecting to see their worst defeat in almost 3 decades, with Nick Clegg's future hanging in the balance.
And could we see Nigel Farage stepping down as leader of UKIP if he fails to become an MP? What does all this mean for our Parliament?
What deals are going to be made?
And what does it mean for you?
We've got everything you need to know.
Friday, 8th of May, live from ITV Studios. This is Good Morning Britain, Election 2015, with Ben Shepherd and Susanna Reid.
Good morning, it is 6 o'clock.
What a night it's been so far, Susanna. Let's have a look at the picture as it stands. And you can see that those seats are changing all the time. Conservatives currently have 206, now ahead of Labour on 188.
Very, very difficult and disappointing night for the Liberal Democrats. You can see there 6 seats, 3 political leaders, futures perhaps
Hanging in the balance,
hanging in the balance this morning.
In the others as well, the DUP having a strong night, 8 seats so far. I wonder whether there could be some sort of deal to be done, if indeed the Conservatives need to make a deal at all.
It is a very different morning to what you might have expected when you went to bed last night. It looks like the polls have got it a little wrong. Dan Rivers has the latest on the election results so far.
Even before most of the results were in, David Cameron was beaming with confidence as it became clear the polls were wrong and the Conservatives were exceeding their most optimistic predictions. It made for a grim night for Ed Miliband, annihilated in Scotland and unable to make up the difference across England and Wales.
Miliband, Ed, Labour Party, 20,708 votes.
I'm deeply sorry for what has happened. And I also want to say that the next government has a huge responsibility. It has a huge responsibility in facing the very difficult task of keeping our country together.
His loss was her gain, Nicola Sturgeon pulling off one of the most spectacular political coups in modern British electoral history. SNP scalps included Douglas Alexander, Labour's shadow Foreign Secretary, and former Lib Dem leader Charles Kennedy. Labour's leader in Scotland, Jim Murphy, was defeated, and the SNP even took Gordon Brown's seat in Kilcuddy.
What we are witnessing here in Scotland is a historic shift in the political firmament.
By the time Nick Clegg arrived at his Sheffield Hallam count, his party had been devastated. And he only narrowly hung on to his seat after a strong challenge from Labour.
That Nick Clegg has been duly elected. Thank you.
It is now painfully clear that this has been a cruel and punishing night for the Liberal Democrats.
One he said had implications for his position in the party. Vince Cable among those swept aside by a wave of hostility towards the coalition partners after 18 years as MP for Twickenham. And Simon Hughes, another high-profile Lib Dem casualty, stunning defeats that have left the party reeling. It's still not clear if David Cameron will have enough seats for an overall majority, but this morning it is the Conservatives who are out in front as the final results come in. Dan Rivers, Good Morning Britain.
Well, we saw there the Liberal Democrat leader, Nick Clegg, saying that it was a cruel and punishing night for the party. Just to bring you up to date, some of the big names who have lost their seats, the Liberal Democrat Energy Secretary, Ed Davey, lost at Kingston and Surbiton. The Business Secretary, the Lib Dem Vince Cable, lost his seat at Twickenham.
Huge shock, that one, wasn't it?
Schools Minister David Laws lost Yeovil. Home Office Minister Lynn Featherstone for the Liberal Democrats lost Hornsey and Wood Green. And the Liberal Democrats Business Minister Jo Swinson also lost her seat.
Well, a short time ago, David Cameron won his Witney seat in Oxfordshire, and he spoke about the general election results.
Some people say, in fact, I've often said, that there's only one opinion poll that counts, and that's the one on election day. And I'm not sure that's ever been truer than it is today and tonight. This is clearly a very strong night for the Conservative Party. I think we've had a positive response to a positive campaign about safeguarding our economy, about creating jobs, about a record in government over the last 5 years, but above all, a plan for the next 5 years, and based on clear values of wanting to reward work in our country, that those who put in and do their best should find the system is on their side.
So Sue Jameson is at Downing Street for us this morning. Very good morning to you, Sue. What does this say then? Is it guaranteed now that David Cameron will be the person who's going to go walking back through that door behind you?
I don't think a stick of furniture is going to be altered from inside number 10. Look, if there had been 300 votes for the Tories, and the predictions are it's going to go way over that into a majority, even then David Cameron probably could have said, I can form a minority government. Obviously, if he gets near his majority, then it's a slam dunk. And in fact, in that speech that you just heard from Witney, he very cheekily said that he wanted to lead a country of one nation. That is Ed Miliband's phrase. That is really putting the knife in and twisting it. So I think what we are going to see now is a very confident David Cameron, but down the line it's going to be bittersweet, because if he does have a majority of 1 or 2 or 3, he only needs to talk to people like John Major to know just how disastrous that can be, because on the right wing of his party he's got plenty of people who do not agree with what he's trying to do, and I think Europe is going to be the big issue that comes up and bites him. He'll be in celebratory mood right now. There are going to be some real problems, I think, for him down the line, and that is if we carry on, obviously, with the results that we're seeing so far.
Sue, let's talk about the Labour Party. An awful night for them, particularly Ed Miliband, and his leadership looks like it's hanging by a thread.
Oh, yes, and I think that thread will snap really within the next few hours, particularly if Ed Balls, the man who he said was going to write the Labour budget with him, if he loses his seat, and there's quite a lot of social media comment that that is going to happen. I have to say that within the party there has been sometimes a surprising amount of solidarity behind Ed Miliband that has not been reflected in any way in the general polls of the public. There, his personal ratings have been dismal, and I think we can now say that there are many people who perhaps would have liked to have voted Labour and didn't necessarily want to see Ed Miliband being the person to go through that door. I know that personality shouldn't matter in politics, but it does.
All right, Sue, thanks very much. Sue at Downing Street, obviously, for us all morning. It has been a dramatic and unexpected night overnight. How does all of this, though, translate into forming a government? Julie Etchingham is looking at the national picture, and we'll hear from her in just a moment. Plus, we'll have reactions from key locations across the whole of the UK.
Lorraine is in Glasgow for us this morning, where the SNP has all but wiped Labour from the political map. Their leader, Nicola Sturgeon, will be joining Lorraine there later on.
And Kate is live on the River Thames with the people who really matter in all of this. Of course, the voters. I'm going to be finding out which way our undecided mums cast their votes.
So, as we said, the political map in Scotland has changed beyond recognition. The SNP have made huge gains, taking a significant number of seats away from Labour. Lorraine is in Glasgow, as you saw. Good morning, Lorraine. So the people of Scotland have spoken loud and clear.
They certainly have, an absolutely incredible result. I mean, people have sort of run out of superlatives and descriptions for this. It's absolutely amazing. I'm here in Glasgow. The SNP took all 7 seats in Glasgow. And if you look at what Scotland looked like yesterday, they had 6 seats yesterday. Now they've got 55. It is quite remarkable and a disaster for Labour, an absolute disaster. Mary Poppins couldn't put a positive spin on this, let me tell you. I'm joined now by Peter McMacken, he's political editor from ITN in the Borders. As I said, absolute disaster for Labour.
First of all, I think we'd probably say this is a huge triumph for the SNP and for its still relatively new leader, Nicola Sturgeon, who took over from... What was his name? Alex something, you know?
He's on his way to Westminster.
That's right. The Sturgeon surge has been something to behold. People love Nicola Sturgeon and they believe the message that she's giving them. Now, Labour, of course, they challenged that message. They said it didn't add up. They even said austerity would last longer under the SNP. Didn't make any difference. People still believed the message that Nicola Sturgeon gave them, standing up for Scotland, fighting for Scotland and ending austerity. And you see, for Labour, this is absolutely catastrophic.
One MP.
They've lost big hitters like Douglas Alexander, the Shadow Foreign Secretary. Jim Murphy, the Labour leader in Scotland, has gone. And they even lost in Gordon Brown's constituency, Kirkcaldy and Fife. Absolute Labour heartlands falling across all of Scotland. Huge majorities, huge swing, tsunamis, earthquakes, whatever analogy you want to use. It really is unprecedented.
It is unprecedented, you're absolutely right. Well, let's go and talk to a couple of voters over here. Hi there. Morning to you. Now, Fraser McDonald and Gail. Fraser, you are very young, first-time voter in the election, in the general election, and you voted SNP. Why?
I did. I just believe that the system we have just now isn't really working for Scotland. I believe, as a lot of young people do at the moment, that there's an alternative that's been put out there. It seems like it's going to do a lot of good for Scotland, and as a politics student, it's something I've been really interested in kind of looking into, and it was a choice for me.
And you're a relatively new member?
Yes, only about last week I did actually join. It's that way, you never want to pin yourself down, you know, and I'd always kind of try to remain impartial, but I think push came to shove and I thought, I think I've got to give the party my support.
And now the third biggest party in the UK.
Yes.
Gail, a disaster for Labour. What went wrong?
I think a lot of people are still living in the shadow of Tony Blair, and a lot of people, I was at the polling station yesterday, were saying I'll never forgive him for Iraq. So I think we're still dealing with that.
You think it's that? You still think that's a hangover?
That's exactly what people were saying to me yesterday, and I'm afraid that's led to this appalling situation. We're going to end up with a one-party state in Scotland and a one-party state in England, and we're going to be run by a lot of economic illiterates. I'm very afraid of the future here.
You don't feel very confident then for the future of Scotland? Because, I mean, the SNP supporters are on a high.
When Fraser was 3 and Tony Blair got in, he was walking on water. And I think Nicola Sturgeon is now walking on water. Give it time. That's all I'm saying. Give it time.
Gail, thank you.
There's another election next year, guys.
There is indeed. Thank you both very much indeed. That's all from us for the moment. We will see you later in the programme.
Lorraine, thanks very much.
So, well, last night we went to bed thinking one thing, because the polls showed that Labour and Conservative were head-to-head.
For more or less 6 weeks it's been going backwards and forwards.
And this morning it looks like, obviously, the Conservatives pulled ahead. It, therefore, is a real upset for the polls. So how did those votes translate into seats? Julie Etchingham is over in the ITV News studio. Very good morning to you, Julie. You've been keeping an eye on this, obviously, all night. So how do we stand now at just coming up to 6:15?
Yeah, well, we've been looking at as the results have come in, and also off the back of our exit poll, which, you know, feels like days ago already, we've been using our graphics to sort of have a look at how that may be most clearly portrayed. And let's check in now with our prediction now. We had our exit poll first thing when we came on air at 10. We've now got a prediction based on the seats that have been declared, and it is simple because a little earlier we had to add up some of these figures to see how the maths might work out in our Commons calculator with that crucial number of 326. And on the prediction that we are now saying, with the results that are in so far, there is only one block of seats that we need to put into our cube, and that is the Conservative seats, 327 over that line of 326. So it's a pretty simple bit of maths at this stage in the morning. Lots of results obviously still to come in, but we don't need to start adding other seats in at this stage. The figure is there, as you can see, 327, getting over that line of 326. The majority there, it may be a little confusing there, but that's down to the Speaker and those who don't necessarily take their seats in the Commons. So that that is the sort of most clear visual image of what we can tell you so far. But another incredible view of what has been going on overnight, if you're just waking up to some of the real headlines from this story tonight, is what has happened to the Liberal Democrat vote, what has happened in Scotland, what's happened to Labour and the Tory vote. So these are the heat maps, if you like, of the votes that were shared out between the parties and where they fell in the country in 2010 after that election. You can see there's that belt of Tory blue at the end of the 2010 election, solid red for Labour. The further north you go, clearly right up in Scotland. You look at the Lib Dem map of 2010, you can see that heartlands, Lib Dem territory in the southwest. But if you look at the change in those maps with the results that we have in so far, look at what's happened to Scotland. Labour almost wipe out. Look at what's happened to the Liberal Democrat vote. We'll have more of these a little later on in the morning as the results come in.
Julie, thanks very much.
Let's go over to Maidenhead now and speak to the Home Secretary Theresa May, who has just hung on to her seat there with an increased majority, I understand. So a good morning for you and a good morning for your party. But, I mean, even your polls weren't telling you this.
Well, I think out there what was happening on the doorsteps and what we were seeing from people was that people were increasingly focusing on the real choice they had at the election, that choice about who was going to be in number 10 Downing Street, David Cameron or Ed Miliband, that choice about whether they were going to go forwards with the Conservatives, building on the economic recovery that we've already seen, building that strong economy, securing people's future at every stage of their life, or fall back into economic chaos under Labour. And increasingly we were seeing people focusing on that choice, and I think the result that we've seen here in Maidenhead and elsewhere reflects that.
Predictions at the moment suggesting that you may just sneak over the line and have a very small working majority, but just by the odd seat here and there. Is that what you're planning for? Theresa May, can you hear us in the studio? It seems like we might have lost your link. Can you hear us from the studio? Unfortunately, the link to Theresa May down there in Maidenhead has gone down, which is a shame, but she holds on to her seat. And she's been there since 1997 in Maidenhead. Very sexy.
Let's find out what the headlines are saying this morning. Here's Ranveer.
Yes, thank you. It's been an emerging picture this morning. The headlines are these. The Conservatives are confident David Cameron will remain at number 10. The results so far suggest the Tories will win a predicted 327 seats, giving them a very slim majority of 2.
We published a manifesto that was squarely for working people. That is what we put in our manifesto. That is what I hope we'll be able to implement in government.
The Labour leader, Ed Miliband, accepted his party should have done better.
But this has clearly been a very disappointing and difficult night for the Labour Party. We haven't made the gains we wanted in England and Wales. And in Scotland, we've seen a surge of nationalism overwhelm our party.
The Scottish National Party are heading for a landslide in Scotland and are due to become the 3rd largest party at Westminster.
It is an extraordinary statement of intent from the people of Scotland. The Scottish lion has roared this morning across the country.
It has been a disastrous night for the Liberal Democrats, who are facing the loss of dozens of seats. Nick Clegg said he will be talking to his party about his future later this morning. And, of course, there's UKIP that we've got to look out for. Nigel Farage's seat is still up for grabs. That's due at about 8 o'clock, we think.
Yeah, while we're on air this morning, indeed. And he did say, of course, that if he didn't win Thanet South and become an MP, he would resign as leader of UKIP.
So just a few days on this programme, he was expecting to win a handful of seats as well, 5 or 6 seats. So far, it's just the one for UKIP. So they've had a lot of votes, but not necessarily the seats that they were looking for.
Well, still to come, Kate, is with the real decision-makers, of course, in all of this. The people who voted.
Yes, indeed. The voters have spoken, and what they've said in casting those votes has surprised many in the political parties, many of the pollsters, and probably even you at home. And as you know, we've been following our group of undecided mums throughout the campaign. They now made up their minds. We're going to find out how they voted and what it reveals and whether it reflects the national picture a little bit later on.
OK, Kate, thanks very much. Right now, we're going to get the latest election news, travel and weather where you are. We'll be back shortly.
Very good morning to you. We're just hearing that Mark Reckless has lost his seat at Rochester and Strood. So currently UKIP have just one seat, Douglas Carswell, hanging on to his seat, and we are expecting a declaration in Thanet South.
It's been delayed, hasn't it, till 11 o'clock this morning, so it seems like there's a very, very slim majority they want to recount.
So that's Nigel Farage contesting that seat, of course, at Thanet South, the UKIP leader. Meanwhile, the Conservatives have performed better in the election than any of the polls predicted, but if they don't win an outright majority once all the seats are declared, could they be looking to smaller parties like the DUP in Northern Ireland for support?
Joining us now from Belfast is the DUP's Simon Hamilton. Good morning to you this morning, Simon. Thanks very much for joining us. So, look, let's talk about the potential forming of some sort of alliance with the Conservatives. If that was to take place and they didn't manage to get this majority, what sort of things would the DUP be looking for?
Before the election, we set out our manifesto to the people of Northern Ireland. In fact, we set out a 5-point plan for these very sort of negotiations that may happen over the next number of days and perhaps longer, which would be about focusing on doing the best for Northern Ireland. And we weren't throwing all of our eggs in with the Conservative basket or a Labour basket. We were determined to work with principally whoever was the biggest party, and it does look like it's going to be the Conservative Party. But whatever deal that we would be looking to do, whatever support we might be able to offer to a Conservative administration, would be on the basis of what was best for Northern Ireland and what we could get for Northern Ireland and for citizens here.
Yeah, and when you say what is best for Northern Ireland and what you can get for Northern Ireland, what might those things be?
Well, primary, there's several points that we've made in our Northern Ireland plan, but primary amongst those are ensuring that public services can continue to get the investment that they need to deliver for people here in Northern Ireland, just as they are right across the United Kingdom. Also in continued support for our growing economy. Our economy in Northern Ireland, like the rest of the UK, is growing. It's starting to do well, but it could improve. We have long-standing structural problems with our economy, which we want support from. We've been doing very well. Our unemployment has been falling. The economy has been growing over the last number of years. We believe that there is additional support required that could come from Westminster to ensure that the economic growth that the rest of the United Kingdom is enjoying continues in Northern Ireland.
It's been quite a night, a positive night for the DUP. You've kept 8 seats as you had in the last election, and obviously things are still being counted. How will the results in England and particularly north of the border resonate over there in Northern Ireland?
Well, I think the result in the rest of the United Kingdom that is interesting us most in terms of its impact here in Northern Ireland is the success of the SNP and the great many MPs that they are returning to the House of Commons. We want to see one of our key focuses, as you would expect from a unionist party, is to see that the union remains strong and indeed flourishes over the next number of years, and that the United Kingdom is a strong place. So we don't want to see this growth in SNP, which I think is a formidable result, and I praise them for that. But we don't want to see that being used as some way to weaken and water down the union, which we hold very dear.
All right, Simon Hamilton from the DUP talking to us from Belfast. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Let's have a look at the latest election headlines. Ranveer has the details.
Yeah, the numbers are proving very interesting this morning. The counts are still going on. There are 139 seats that we still need to look at. But let's take a look at what's happened so far. You can see, if we look at the SNP, it has been a whitewash for them, who have virtually won every seat in Scotland. I mean, it's been a dismal night for the Lib Dems, who have lost 40 seats. And the fact here is that they have lost almost every single cabinet minister that they have, except for Nick Clegg, who held on to his seat, and the Scottish Secretary, Alistair Carmichael. Labour have made some gains. They are on 203 seats. But of course, we're just going to update this now. Let's take a look. This is the share of the vote. So the Conservatives are on 33.9%, Labour just behind. But of course, the big question that people have is whether these shares ever translate into the right number of seats. So that's a huge issue, I think, in terms of how politics works in this country. And I'm sure UKIP will be having to say something about that, because they've had a lot of votes, but so far, not very many seats, and they will be pushing for a change, I should imagine.
I'm sure you're right, Ranveer. Thank you. Yeah, let's talk about that to Dr. Rosie Campbell, who's a voting and election analyst. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Well, let's start then with the Conservative success overnight. Are they heading for a majority?
It's ever so narrow, and I think they may just get a majority, but at the moment it's looking like that will be perhaps with the DUP 1 or 2 seats. And we know from history that trying to govern with that kind of very narrow majority is extraordinarily difficult. You just need to lose one candidate for ill health or whatever it is, one MP for ill health, have a by-election or fall out with the DUP. It's not going to be straightforward. It's much better than they were expecting, and I suppose that's why we're viewing it as a success. But it's still potentially complicated.
So even if they get that small working majority, you'd still can see them trying to make a deal with the DUP, for example, to try and extend that majority and make it more...
I think obviously we've still got quite a few seats, and it may be that they push over that 3-2-3 and they can manage on their own. But if it fits the exit poll and we're more at kind of 3-16, then I think they will need to make a more... have more serious conversations with the DUP.
Rosie, sometimes we talk about a majority being more than 3-2-3. Sometimes we talk about it being 3-2-6. Can you just explain why there is a difference in those numbers?
Well, one reason is that the Speaker's seat isn't usually contested, so that's one down. There are 650 seats, divide them by 2, but then we lose the Speaker's seat. The Sinn Féin MPs don't traditionally take their seats, so you remove that. And so that's why we actually get down to this number of 3-2-3.
One more thing as well, Rosie, that hasn't been spoken about just yet is turnout. What's the turnout been so far?
I think it's about 65%. I must say I'm a bit surprised, because I think that this campaign, obviously we haven't got all the results as yet, but if that's the case, I thought it was going to be higher, because it's not only such a close election, but all the smaller parties having such a significant role. I thought that would draw people out, so I'm surprised if that is the right
figure. And a lower
figure.
turnout seems to have benefited the Tories particularly.
Potentially, although it's the same turnout as last time. It's just what you would expect in a really competitive and interesting election, as you'd expect to see it go up.
All right, Dr. Rosie Campbell, thanks very much indeed.
So, what do those who made the decisions think of the results themselves? Kate is with some of our voters by the River Thames this morning. Morning, Kate.
Morning to you. My goodness, well, they said this would be all about the undecided voters, didn't they? And from the difference in the results that are coming in and the polls, they made up their minds very, very late. Now, you know our undecided minds. We've been following them throughout the campaign. We can now find out, indeed, how they voted. Now, Louise, of course, your constituency was Falkirk. It was Labour. It's now SNP. How did you vote?
I voted for SNP.
Did you? So you got what you wanted?
Yes, I was very pleased.
Or did you, though? Because one of the reasons, one of the ideas was that the SNP might end up in some form of government, some form of coalition with Labour. That doesn't look likely to happen. Are you disappointed at that?
I'm disappointed in that, yeah. I was hoping that would happen.
If you'd voted Labour, it might have been a different picture.
But then I wouldn't be accurately represented at Westminster. I would rather have an SNP.
And Jane, my goodness, well, you're in Bolton West,
yep.
Which has actually gone to the Tories, hasn't it?
Yeah.
How did you vote?
I voted Labour.
So your vote didn't count there, did it really?
No.
Are you very disappointed with how Labour has done generally?
I think so, yes. I think it's been sad for them, yeah.
And do you blame Ed Miliband? Because a lot of people are saying it's down to personality and down to him.
I think it has been down to personality, and I think he's not done particularly well in the debates. I don't think he'd make a great Prime Minister, unfortunately.
No, well, that doesn't bode well for his continuing as leader of the party, those views, does it? Cam, right, now, remind me of your constituency.
It's Edgbaston.
OK, and that has gone Labour. How did you vote?
Conservative.
Right, you must be the only person who voted Conservative that didn't actually get what they wanted possibly overnight, did you? How do you feel about how things have panned out generally?
Generally, I'm happy because I voted Conservative. I'm very confident with the Conservative Party, so I'm happy.
Lisa, how did you vote in the end?
I did vote Lib Dem in the end.
OK, and how did it pan out in your constituency? It didn't go well for you, did it?
It went to the Conservatives.
Very, very, very tight margin, though. You must be feeling as a Democrat voter this morning. What are you feeling? Confused? Disappointed?
Just really disappointed. I think they've really paid the price of going into coalition with the Conservatives. I think they alienated a lot of their supporters by doing that. So I'm really disappointed.
And Louise, now, of course, you were in Thurrock. That was one of UKIP's big target seats, but eventually Conservative.
Conservative,
How did you vote?
Conservative, yeah.
So you're smiling this morning?
I'm really pleased with the result.
Really pleased indeed. OK, well, very, very interesting, and interesting to see how that reflects nationally as well.
Kate, thanks very much. It is 27 minutes to 7. You're watching Good Morning Britain, election 2015. And we're going to have a good look around the electoral picture in just a moment. First of all, Laura is on the roof with a look at the weather for us. Morning, Laura.
Good morning. Yes, there's a few spots of rain here on the roof this morning, heralding the change of a band of rain spreading north across the country today. Into the weekend is the story of sunshine and showers on Saturday, a little bit milder in the south by Sunday with some rain around in the north. But this is how it looks right now. A band of rain across the south and west, dry and chilly across northern areas with some sunshine. But through the day, our band of rain will go northwards. A thoroughly miserable wet afternoon through much of Wales, the Midlands and northern areas of England, but turning much milder in the south. But for all the weather this weekend, you can check out my forecast online. Find out more about the weather for where you are at itv.com/GMB.
Good morning, Britain. You're watching our coverage of the election 2015. It has been an extraordinary night. One of the most exciting and dramatic elections that any of us can remember. It has been a good night for the Conservatives, it has been a disastrous night for Labour and for the Lib Dems, and it has been a very, very good night for the SNP in Scotland.
Dan Rivers has the latest on those election results so far.
Even before most of the results were in, David Cameron was beaming with confidence as it became clear the polls were wrong and the Conservatives were exceeding their most optimistic predictions. It made for a grim night for Ed Miliband, annihilated in Scotland and unable to make up the difference across England and Wales.
Miliband, Ed, Labour Party, 20,708 votes.
I'm deeply sorry for what has happened. And I also want to say that the next government has a huge responsibility. It has a huge responsibility in facing the very difficult task of keeping our country together.
His loss was her gain, Nicola Sturgeon pulling off one of the most spectacular political coups in modern British electoral history. SNP scalps included Douglas Alexander, Labour's shadow foreign secretary, and former Lib Dem leader Charles Kennedy. Labour's leader in Scotland, Jim Murphy, was defeated, and the SNP even took Gordon Brown's seat in Kilcuddy.
What we are witnessing here in Scotland is a historic shift in the political firmament.
By the time Nick Clegg arrived at his Sheffield Hallam count, his party had been devastated. And he only narrowly hung on to his seat after a strong challenge from Labour.
That Nick Clegg has been duly elected. Thank you.
It is now painfully clear that this has been a cruel and punishing night for the Liberal Democrats.
One he said had implications for his position in the party. Vince Cable among those swept aside by a wave of hostility towards the coalition partners after 18 years as MP for Twickenham. And Simon Hughes, another high-profile Lib Dem casualty, stunning defeats that have left the party reeling. It's still not clear if David Cameron will have enough seats for an overall majority, but this morning it is the Conservatives who are out in front as the final results come in. Dan Rivers, Good Morning Britain.
And look who's joined us in the studio.
Hello, good morning.
Very good morning to you. When did you last sleep?
Feel good.
Well, it's good to have you with us on Good Morning
Thank you.
Britain.
Feels good to be here.
And you're going to be talking us through all these results, of course, throughout the morning now. Now, when you saw those exit polls and you have seen what has developed overnight, of course, you've been hosting ITV News' coverage overnight. What strikes you about what we were expecting and what we can now expect?
Well, I think the first thing is that I've been with ITN 25 years, and that is one of the most amazing nights I've ever lived through. It was an astonishing night to see Douglas Alexander. I mean, I was at university with Douglas Alexander. We were in the same tutorials. I was doing useless things with my time, which we better not go into now. But he was off to campaign for the Labour Party and all the rest of it. He's been, he's the shadow foreign secretary. He served Gordon Brown. Tony Blair lost his seat. Gordon Brown's seat, one of the safest seats you could ever imagine, gone from the Labour Party. Vince Cable, down here in Twickenham. I just could not have imagined that there was any possibility that Vince Cable was going to lose his seat. Nobody, I think, in politics would have imagined that, and so on and so on and so on. So, an amazing night for the SNP, a terrible night for the Liberal Democrats, a really extraordinary night in British politics.
Tom, in your 20-odd years with ITN, have polls that we've been following for the last 6 weeks ever been so wrong as they were when we first got that exit poll?
Well, I suppose 1992 is the one that immediately springs to mind, and, you know, we're going to be poring over. It's not a great morning for the pollsters, let's be honest about it. And it was very interesting presenting the show last night because, you know, we have that moment just before we go on air when we gather and we get the final results of the opinion poll, and, you know, I can't remember how many of us there were in the room, but obviously we then have to run in and effectively do it, and, you know, there was a bit of, sorry, repeat that?
Yeah.
What? Really? And so it was kind of slightly startling to go on air thinking, oh my God, this is what appears to be happening. So it was a very, very startling. Where are we now?
We're at Tory party headquarters there, where they are standing by for the imminent arrival of David Cameron. So we're just going to keep an eye on that out of the corner of our eye while you carry on.
Well, you asked me what's going to happen next, and if you wanted to wind up, if you were a political journalist over the last 5 years and you wanted to wind up David Cameron in private, you'd say, well, of course, your worst nightmare is a Tory majority of 5. And you'd go, ha, ha, ha. No, seriously, it is. That's your worst nightmare. Yeah, OK.
Why is that
well,
so
because
bad?
he's had... there are plenty of his backbenchers who don't like him. There are some of them who really, really don't like him. And he's had a very comfortable majority with the Liberal Democrats, with a bunch of people who, truth be known, he gets on pretty well with. He finds them pretty reasonable. Here he is coming down towards London. So he looked pretty sombre in his acceptance speech, and he looked pretty sombre for a couple of reasons. He was obviously trying to strike a mood of not being triumphalist. But I think there's also an element to which part of his leadership team is going to be thinking, well, this is great, we can do a whole bunch of things. Part of them are going to be thinking, oh, my God, what are we going to do now? These backbenchers are going to be out for us. And I think the truth is they'll hold it together as long as they can deliver the Euro referendum, and up to the Euro referendum. After that, he will probably go in 2017.
We come out of a coalition government and look like there may be a slim majority for the Conservatives. The Conservatives have benefited from coalition government. The Lib Dems have been totally punished for being part of that coalition, haven't they, by their supporters?
You know, punished is a really polite way of putting it, isn't it? Sort of practically annihilated. I think it's been... I mean, what does that say about politics, our approach to it, our attitude to coalition? There are various points at which people have said they quite like the coalition. They'd like to see more coalition as well. Nobody's going to go into coalition if that's what happens. And I think there was... You know, quite a lot of people who cover politics, I think, feel there was a vituperative abuse poured upon the Liberal Democrats that possibly at some points went beyond the reasonable, and they are paying the price for that tonight. And, you know, maybe in retrospect we should have realised this was going to happen, because all the polls were saying 8%, and 8% is what they got.
One of the things that did happen, though, and the Lib Dems particularly talked about this after the last coalition, was they felt like they were forced and bounced into it too quickly. And if ever a coalition was going to form again, it wasn't going to take 5 days, it was going to take a lot longer. And if that had been the case, and it might still be the case, do you think it would have provided a bit more stability for the parties that would be joining the Tories?
I don't know. I mean, I've often spoken with Nick Clegg in public and in private about the whole business of the tuition fees thing, and whether he... actually, if he'd had more time... And don't forget, there was an economic crisis brewing. He was under a lot of pressure from the Governor of the Bank of England, who was saying, you know, get in there, make the deal, and so were others. If he'd had more time, would he have said, listen, actually, I can't agree to that? But, you know, the brutal truth is, they went in, they looked at the books, we had an enormous deficit, you know, approaching £200 billion. That's an awful big hole to fill, and it had to come from somewhere. I'm not saying he made the right decision. I'm just saying it wasn't like there was a good option and a bad option. There was bad option, worse, absolutely terrible.
So he could never have won that argument? He could never have forced that through?
I think the problem he had, and I think the problem most people who cover politics think he had, is that he went into the election, as the Lib Dems had very often before, not really expecting to be in power and not really realistically preparing the public for what he would have to do if he was in power, and he has now paid the price for that. And the interesting thing is, you know, you probably saw his acceptance speech, or have taken clips from it. He seemed to be striking a certain tone in which he was almost already conceding his leadership, but there's not many of them left, and his party may say, well, hold on a minute, there's none of us left, you're not going. Don't know.
Thanks very much indeed, Tom. Well, the people who really matter, of course, on all of this are the voters, because they seem to have told the pollsters one thing and then gone out and put an X in, you know, in some cases in a different box. So you're going to go and talk to some of them, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm going to go down to the wharf and visit some of our voters that were undecided.
Yeah.
up till election day. It'll be interesting to see exactly what made them change their minds or decide to go for the parties that they went for, and why so many didn't necessarily admit who they were going to vote for till the day itself.
Yeah. Good. All right, Ben. Well, you go off to the wharf. Tom, I think you're going to slide into the seat next to me.
Into the comfy chair.
Yeah, into the comfy chair. I think it's even got a cushion on it.
Looks a lot more comfortable.
As Tom was saying, it's been a disastrous night for the Liberal Democrats. They've lost 40 seats so far.
Yes, indeed. I'm joined by Lord Paddy Ashdown. Paddy, I hate to rub salt into sore wounds, but this has been a disastrous night for the Lib Dems, hasn't it?
Yeah, I find the adjective a little, you can apply it. I mean, you know, it's a rough old trade. Politics, as you know, but humbling, humiliating, painful beyond our imaginings, all those things. And yet, John, I remain proud of the campaign that we fought. I remain proud of the things that we fought for, Nick Clegg, those values of decency, of respect for others, of fairness, and of unity, not division. And, you know, you need those now in our country more than ever before. Liberalism is now needed more than ever before, and we shall be back fighting for them
but
more than ever before.
Will you be back with Nick Clegg? Because in his speech, he
That's
seemed
up to
to
him
hint...
to decide.
Give
Give the man some space. Come on. He's done this country an immense service. If we are to lose him, and I hope we won't, then arguably the most decent man in politics will be leaving us, and politics will be immensely the weaker for that. He will make his decision in time. I'm not speculating on it. He can make his decision, not me.
But many of your own supporters surely
John,
would say,
I'm not
Paddy,
going to speculate.
his position is not tenable.
But it's up to Nick to decide that. Give the man the space to decide that after having thought about it and with a degree of dignity. You owe him that, and so do I.
OK, fair enough. Why do you think this happened?
Look, we fought a campaign of hope against a campaign of fear. Fear of the Scots, fear of Europe, fear of I don't know what, but the kind of fears that I'm afraid the Tories unleashed, and fear has won and hope has lost tonight, and I think the country is the poorer for it. But look, for the moment, let's just accept this is the judgment of the ballot box. Let us see what this government does. Some may argue, maybe I'm one, that the campaign the Prime Minister has played from the very moment he steps outside Downing Street to make that very foolish speech straight off the Scottish referendum has pitted us, England against the Scots, and I hope this government finds a way around the division they've created. We will certainly help them to do that. But I think the unity of our nation is now more at risk. But we have a government. I wish them well. I hope they will overcome these divisions. I expect them to. We will certainly work to do that. One thing I'm very clear about that, and that is this, that those values of liberalism that keep us in Europe, that keep us decent, are now more needed than ever before. We shall continue to fight for them, and we shall be back.
Thank you. Paddy Ashdown, thank you very much indeed. Back to you in the studio.
John, thanks very much indeed. So we are following, obviously, an aerial shot there of David Cameron's car. He's on his way to Conservative Party headquarters after securing his seat, of course, a safe Tory seat. There, and that would be the biggest surprise of the night, of course, if that had changed at all.
Yes, it certainly would. It certainly would.
But there have been many, many surprises, of course, overnight, because the exit polls said one thing, and we have a very different picture. I mean, you know, from the polls, from the predicted polls and the opinion polls.
Well, there's an interesting thing all night as well, because, you know, Colin Rallings, our election analyst, is sitting there who works on the poll. And so we're constantly saying, all right, Colin, come on, you know, where's the updated projection? And the poor chap is sitting there trying to talk and, you know, concentrate on being on a television programme whilst actually crunching the data. But anyway, we'll see. We
imagine at the moment, the predicted number of seats for the Conservatives, 327, and for Labour, 233, for the Lib Dems, 10, and for the SNP, 56. An absolutely extraordinary night for the SNP. I mean, it's one of the main headlines, of course, this morning, isn't it? Yes,
and I think, I mean, one of the things we're going to have to see as the morning goes on is what attitude David Cameron takes and his team when they arrive at Tory headquarters and contemplate what it's actually going to be like to exist with one of the smallest majorities we can contemplate. You know, will they do a deal with the DUP to give themselves a bit more comfort? Will they go and talk to the Liberal Democrats? I can't imagine that there's going to be much to talk about in the current climate. But nevertheless, the kind of majority we're talking about is a very, very uncomfortably small one. And I suspect one of the first callers will be John Major.
Interesting. Let's have a look at the election headlines so far. Here's Ranveer.
Thank you. Good morning. There are still 108 counts to go, but this morning the Conservatives are indeed on course to be the single biggest party in the Commons with an expected slim majority of just 2.
we published a manifesto that was squarely for working people. That is what we put in our manifesto. That is what I hope we'll be able to implement in government.
The Labour leader, Ed Miliband, has accepted his party should have done better.
But this has clearly been a very disappointing and difficult night for the Labour Party. We haven't made the gains we wanted in England and Wales, and in Scotland, we've seen a surge of nationalism overwhelm our party.
And in keeping with that, the SNP are indeed heading for a landslide victory in Scotland. They ousted the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Danny Alexander, and Labour's Scottish leader and Shadow Foreign Secretary.
We will work to put an end to the austerity cuts which are hurting people in communities both north and south of the border.
And she, incidentally, is only 20 years old. It's been a disastrous night, meanwhile, for the Liberal Democrats, who are facing the loss of dozens of seats. Nick Clegg said that he would be talking to his party about his future later this morning. Paddy Ashdown, just a moment ago, speaking to John, not willing to be drawn on whether Nick Clegg will go, but many are predicting midday today. Who knows?
Yeah, indeed. 3 political leaders with their futures in the balance, possibly this morning. Let us talk to consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and the Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire. Well, one of you is smiling broadly, and one of you has a resigned smile on their face.
I've had teenage kids. I know how they behave when they get overexcited. I've seen it before. It's a bit like he's just come out of a club.
Kevin, is this a triumph for the Conservative campaign, or for the Conservative supporting papers, who were very cruel in their treatment of Ed Miliband? Or is it the economy? Or is it fear of a Labour SNP deal?
Yeah, I suspect it was a bit of all of those and a few other things too. But there's no doubt that Tory boy is very happy because he's proprietor and keep his non-dom tax status at the Daily Mail. And they were egging on. They took apart Ed Miliband over 4.5 years, and he had a very good campaign, but he had 4.5 years of abuse, and also he hadn't done particularly well in those 4.5 years. So you get into that campaign, and you just haven't got enough gas in the tank. But you know, I mean, his choice now, Ed Miliband, is does he resign today or tomorrow? That's it. It's over for him.
People said that Ed Miliband had a good campaign. OK, he didn't fall flat on his face. That was an achievement for him. But actually, I was one of those people who thought the more people see of him, the more scared they are of him. And I was told yesterday Tories were pouring out to vote because they really thought an Ed Miliband victory would take us back to the 1970s, a very left-wing administration, powerful unions, controlling the markets. And I think that's what...
Kevin, can I just ask you, though, seriously, one of the things I think probably really did happen is that people couldn't make sense of how a Labour SNP arrangement might work. And, you know, partly that was because if you'd asked any of us privately, we said, well, actually, Labour gets wiped out in Scotland and then they've got to do a deal with these people who they really may not get on with. We couldn't work that out. So why would the public have been able to? Do you think, in retrospect, Ed Miliband might have done better to make more sense of that to the public and sort of actually spell out how it would work and how it wouldn't work?
Earlier on, yes, but once he did begin to spell out and say, look, we won't work with them, people weren't listening. And I think David Cameron was deliberately stoking the flames of English nationalism in order to frighten people into his corner. He also knew that would drive more voters in Scotland into the arms of Nicola, Queen of Scots, which was the tactic, because Labour had 41 seats there and he wanted to lose. Now, I thought it was very cynical politics. He may yet lose Scotland as a country. His legacy may be the breakup of a disunited kingdom, but of course he was just fixed on winning this general election. And it looks like, well, he's done it, hasn't he? Whether he gets that overall majority or not, he's won the election.
Just briefly, Andrew, what about UKIP?
Finished.
Do you think?
One of the best results for Cameron as well,
so
too.
Far?
Yeah, but I don't think Nigel Farage is going to win in South Thanet, and that is the end of UKIP, because it was a one-man band, in my view, always. They'll just have one MP, and I think that will be the end of UKIP, and that is a real result, I think, for the Conservatives and the Labour Party, because they've taken a lot of votes in the Labour Party tonight, too.
All right. Andrew and Kevin, for now, thanks very much indeed. Now, the leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood, joins us now from Cardiff. Very good morning to you. Now, it has been an extraordinary morning for the SNP in Scotland, but you haven't benefited in the same way. Why not?
Well, what's happened in Scotland is remarkable. It's unprecedented in any country that I'm aware of. It's been a truly remarkable result. So it's very difficult to compare Scotland with anywhere else. In Wales, in Plaid Cymru, we have held on to the 3 seats that we had before, despite predictions at the beginning of the campaign that we would lose 2 of those 3 seats. And Labour failed to make any inroads in those seats, despite throwing quite a lot of resources at them. And we've laid quite good foundations for next year's National Assembly elections as well, which in 12 months' time, of course, we'll be facing elections here in Wales, where Plaid Cymru will be looking to form the government as the biggest party.
But Leanne, in all seriousness, what's happening in Scotland is remarkable. We can all agree on that. But it's genuinely puzzling to some people. You've had masses of national coverage. You can't complain about the airtime that you filled, and yet you haven't realistically made any headway. And I think people are genuinely puzzled about why there is no crossover from Scotland to Wales whatsoever in terms of nationalism.
Well, I don't accept that we haven't made any headway. Our percentage of the vote here in Cardiff, in our capital city, has increased phenomenally, as it has in many other parts of Wales. But what's happened in Scotland can't really be compared with what's happening elsewhere. The events and the aftermath of last year's referendum is still being felt. People feel aggrieved in Scotland that their voices have not been heard. And there are winds of change sweeping through these islands now. And it's vital that here in Wales we work together with other parties to put our differences aside and make sure that when Scotland is going to receive gains, that Wales makes sure that we get away from this third-rate devolution settlement that we've had suffered from for such a long time. And we can improve our situation, and I think what's required now is a Team Wales approach. People have had differences of opinion ahead of this election, and now we should try to go forward together and build our country together.
All right, Leanne Wood, leader of Plaid Cymru, speaking to us from Cardiff. Thanks very much indeed. So here we go. This is David Cameron in that car, making his way through the streets of London in order to reach a Conservative Party headquarters. And we'll just keep an eye on his journey while we are on air. The Conservatives do look set to win, possibly a slim majority. So let's go down to Westminster and talk to John Stapleton. Morning.
Yes, good morning to you again, Susanna. We've got Philip Hammond with us, Defence Secretary. Yes, as Susanna was saying... Foreign Secretary. As Susanna was saying, sorry, you know, you do look set to win, but by a slender majority. It's going to be a rocky road, isn't it?
Well, it's going to be difficult. If it does turn out to be a government with a small majority, that will require careful management. If it turns out to be a government that's just short of a majority, that also will be requiring difficult, careful management. That's part of the course.
Are you going to have to do a deal with the DUP, do you think?
Well, look, we don't want to speculate at the moment about what the end result is going to be. We're still looking at predictions. The Prime Minister will want to wait until all the results are in, because it's clearly very finely balanced from the predictions we're seeing, and then make the decision what is in the best interests of the country, how best to put a government together that reflects the clear will of the people from what we've seen in the polling result and the best interests of Britain going forward.
But come the EU and the referendum, you're going to face difficulty, not just from the opposition, but from within your own party, aren't you?
Well, I'm clear about the process that we've set out for Europe. We will have a tough negotiation with our partners in Europe. I'm confident that we will get a good package that we'll be able to put to the British people. But we've been absolutely clear. It will be for the British people to decide whether that's good enough in a referendum in 2017.
And given what's happened in Scotland, do we face the possibility that David Cameron could be the last Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
No, we've settled that question in the referendum last year. Scotland has decided to make its future within the United Kingdom.
For the time being.
But we've equally been clear, well, for a generation that referendum settled that issue. But we've equally been clear that we are comfortable devolving more power to the Scottish Government and looking at that as part of a broader settlement about the way Britain is run. English votes for English laws in Westminster, broader powers for the Scottish Government in Scotland. And I hope that we can come to a rapid consensus view about how we're going to move that forward so that Scotland can thrive with a greater degree of autonomy within the United Kingdom.
Philip Hammond, thanks very much indeed for being with us. Back to you in the studio.
John, thanks very much indeed.
Sorry.
So, yep, still covering.
He's still driving.
He's still in that car.
Actually, when I say he's driving, he of course won't be driving. He's in the back of the car, taking lots of calls and working out exactly what size the majority is or looks like being, and then what on earth they're going to do about it. I think one of the first questions they've got to answer is whether they're going to try and live on with a pretty small majority, which is going to get quite painful quite quickly, or whether they're going to try and do some deal, probably with the DUP.
It is the election no one predicted. So the political weather forecast, of course, we are analysing throughout the morning. Meanwhile, let's have a look at the weather from the roof with Laura. Morning.
Good morning. Slightly easier to predict this morning. We've got a band of rain, a few spots of rain here on the roof this morning. Rain across the south and west will move north today, but as we head into the weekend, it's a story of showers and sunshine on Saturday. Come Sunday, a little bit warmer in the south, but rain arrives in the north. But here's the details. The cloud and the rain is gathering at the moment across the southwest. It'll be heavy at times. And as we head through the day, it will march its way northwards. The rain will be heavy through Wales, the Midlands, into northern areas of England this afternoon. An awful afternoon with very, very heavy rain and temperatures on the cool side, 10, 11, 12 degrees at the very best. But to the south of here in the sunshine across the southeast of England, temperatures could be up to 18 or 19 degrees. That is Friday, cloudy and wet. Through Friday night, the rain clears away, and then into Saturday, like I said, it's a story of sunshine and showers. Showers heaviest through the late morning and the early afternoon, potentially the odd rumble of thunder, and just a little bit warmer with the southwesterly flow. As we head through to Sunday, it looks as though things are going to improve again across the south and east, just that little bit warmer with a southwesterly flow. But across the north and west on Sunday, it is looking cloudy with outbreaks of rain. And then it is all change again as we head into next week. Come Monday, the southwesterly flow builds, a high pressure spreads right across the country, and temperatures are set to soar, with temperatures rising way above average. Temperatures as we head through to Monday could be into the low 20s, but as we head through to Tuesday, our temperatures could be up to 25, maybe 26 degrees across the southeast of England, and even 18, 19 degrees across the north and west. So for many of us at the moment, there's rain today, showers tomorrow, but warmer into next week.
Find out more about the weather for where you are at itv.com/GMB.
Welcome to Good Morning Britain, election 2015, and what's turning out to be one of the most dramatic elections in a generation.
David Cameron is inching towards a possible second term as Prime Minister. Dozens of results are still to come in, but the Conservatives could gain a majority of just one.
It's been a disastrous night for Labour and Ed Miliband, particularly in Scotland, where the party has been almost wiped out by the SNP.
What we are witnessing here in Scotland is a historic shift in the political firmament.
The Liberal Democrats are expecting to see their worst defeat in almost 3 decades, with Nick Clegg's future hanging in the balance.
As Cabinet Minister Danny Alexander, the man who helped negotiate the coalition deal, has lost his seat.
And could we see Nigel Farage stepping down as leader of UKIP if he fails to become an MP?
What does all this mean for our Parliament?
Good question. What deals are going to be made?
And what does it mean for you?
We've got everything you could possibly need to know.
Friday, 8th of May, live from ITV Studios. This is Good Morning Britain, Election 2015, with Tom Bradby and Susanna Reid.
Which could be very interesting.
Hello and welcome to Good Morning Britain election special, and Ben has gone down to the wharf to talk to the voters, the people of course who make all of this happen. So ITV News political editor Tom Bradby is here. Very good morning to you.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning to you
So
too.
for you, the headlines this morning?
Total car crash for the Liberal Democrats. Unbelievable. Couldn't have foreseen it coming as we sat there through the night. Just stunning, equally stunning, even more stunning what happened in Scotland. The SNP more or less sweeping the board. These are the seats so far, the Conservatives ahead. I think the question at this point really is, are the Tories going to have a majority? Looks like they are. And what is it going to be?
Let's have a look at the picture so far.
Even before most of the results were in, David Cameron was beaming with confidence.
This is clearly a very strong night for the Conservative Party. I think we've had a positive response to a positive campaign.
And the Conservatives were exceeding their most optimistic predictions.
people were increasingly focusing on the real choice they had at the election, that choice about who was going to be in number 10 Downing Street, David Cameron or Ed Miliband.
It made for a grim night for Ed Miliband, annihilated in Scotland and unable to make up the difference across England and Wales.
Miliband, Ed, Labour Party, 20,708 votes.
I'm deeply sorry for what has happened. And I also want to say that the next government has a huge responsibility. It has a huge responsibility in facing the very difficult task of keeping our country together.
His loss was her gain, Nicola Sturgeon pulling off one of the most spectacular political coups in modern British electoral history. SNP scalps included a brace of Alexanders, Douglas Alexander, Labour's Shadow Foreign Secretary, and Danny Alexander, the Lib Dem Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Labour's leader in Scotland, Jim Murphy, was also out, as was former Lib Dem leader Charles Kennedy.
What we are witnessing here in Scotland is a historic shift in the political firmament.
By the time Nick Clegg arrived at his Sheffield Hallam count, his party had been devastated, and he only narrowly hung on to his seat after a strong challenge from Labour.
That Nick Clegg has been duly elected. Thank you.
It is now painfully clear that this has been a cruel and punishing night for the Liberal Democrats.
One he said had implications for his position in the party. Vince Cable among those swept aside by a wave of hostility towards the coalition partners after 18 years as MP for Twickenham. And Simon Hughes, another high-profile Lib Dem casualty, stunning defeats that have left the party reeling. This morning it's looking increasingly likely that David Cameron will have just enough seats for an overall majority as the final results come in. Dan Rivers, Good Morning Britain.
OK, let's go to Tatton, which is, of course, George Osborne's constituency. And it looks as if, well, George Osborne has, well, he has just won, clearly. And now he's about to speak, which, in the circumstances of this morning, is probably worth hearing.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by thanking the returning officer and all the team that have conducted this count, and the police for keeping us secure, not just tonight, but every day of the year. Can I also say thank you to my fellow candidates on a really well-fought contest and all conducted in a really great democratic spirit. I want to thank my agent, Hayley, over there, and the brilliant team from the Tatton Conservatives, who are the best team anyone could wish for. Thank you so much. And can I also, of course, thank the people of the Tatton constituency for once again putting their trust in me. And I never forget that I go to Parliament with a primary responsibility, which is to represent the people of this constituency in the House of Commons. And I will not forget that over the coming 5 years. I remember standing on this stage 5 years ago, and I made a commitment to work with the British people to try and turn Britain around. And we've made great progress. Tonight, the British people have asked us to finish the job. And that is what we will now set about doing, to make sure we have a country that lives within her means, to make sure we have an economy that works for everyone in our United Kingdom, to bring that United Kingdom together, which is clearly one of the big tasks we now face, to make sure we have the right relationship with Europe, and also a particular passion of mine, to build a northern powerhouse here in the north of England. We've had a historic result tonight. We've got historic challenges ahead of us. So now we will get back to work and make sure we complete the task. Thank you very much.
Well, that is a speech from George Osborne, somewhat full of predictable sound bites, it has to be said, but I think notable for its slightly low-key tone, and that is similar to the speech that David Cameron gave a little earlier, no sign of triumphalism, and deliberately, it seems, striking a particular kind of tone. I think that will be part of a deliberate strategy. I think it's also worth saying that Norman Lamb is back, and We're still watching David Cameron's car driving there, but it's worth saying that Norman Lamb, a Liberal Democrat minister, is back in Norfolk North. The Liberal Democrats have just lost Taunton Dean, so that's another seat down. But they'll be, when I say they'll be pleased to see Norman Lamb back, that's an exaggeration, given that they're so shell-shocked. I don't think they'll be pleased about anything. But at this point, every seat counts, and Norman Lamb is, of course, quite a well-known minister.
It's interesting, isn't it, the way that we had just heard George Osborne saying that the voters have allowed the Conservatives to finish the job. Of course, in the case of the Liberal Democrats, their coalition partners, many of their, for instance, cabinet ministers have had their jobs finished for them. For instance, the Chief Secretary to Treasury, Danny Alexander, the Lib Dem, has lost his seat. The Business Secretary, Vince Cable, Liberal Democrat, has lost his seat. The Energy Secretary, Ed Davey, lost his seat. And other high-profile names, Simon Hughes and former Liberal Democrat leader Charles Kennedy as well.
The interesting thing, Susanna, actually, is that a lot of people like me, political journalists going into this, kept on saying or convincing ourselves that the incumbency effect, this is what the Liberal Democrats kept on telling us, the incumbency effect is going to protect us. And in actual fact, what Jane Green from the British Election Survey, who we had on the programme all night, was saying was that, in fact, what she had picked up during the course of the campaign is that people who didn't like the Liberal Democrats were more likely to want to punish ministers. So actually being a minister, in fact, turned out, or may well have turned out, to be a disadvantage. So it rather sort of reversed the traditional effect. I think it is also worth just saying that I've just been told that there is a recount going on in Morley and Outwood. Now, that is Ed Balls' seat. Now, that should have declared on the normal run of things a long, long time ago. You may remember that in the last election, the Tories tried very hard to get rid of Ed Balls. They started sending around a campaign, will you be up for Ed Balls? He didn't lose, but it's extremely close this morning and gone to a recount.
And we saw, of course, one of the high-profile Labour names, Douglas Alexander, losing his seat at just after 20 past 2 this morning, the Shadow Foreign Secretary. Could that be the same fate for the Shadow Chancellor, Ed Balls? Let's talk to Sue, who is at Downing Street for us this morning. So, Sue, I mean, yesterday we were talking about what sort of coalition deal we might be discussing the numbers of this morning. Now, though, it looks like David Cameron could even have a slim majority.
That's right. And on this extraordinary day, we could have the extraordinary sight of 3 party leaders deciding that they simply can't continue. We've got, obviously, Ed Miliband saying that it's been a very disappointing night. That's probably putting it mildly. There's going to be a lot of deep soul-searching, I think, within the Labour Party about whether they listened to the voters despite those 5 million conversations they've had, whether Ed Miliband was the right man for the job. And then, of course, we've got Nick Clegg saying that he's going to be talking about his position within the party later. And I was interested to listen to Paddy Ashdown, who knows a thing or two about this sort of situation, saying that if Nick Clegg goes, he would lose a very decent man from politics. Does that mean he wouldn't just step down perhaps as the leader of the party, but get out of politics altogether? At this stage also, by the way, we should go back to Lord Ashdown at some point, because he might be having a very unusual breakfast. He said he would eat his hat if the results were as bad as this. And then, of course, we're still waiting to see whether Nigel Farage is able to get that seat that he's gone after in Thanet South. And he's said very, very clearly on this programme he's a man of his word, and therefore he would step down if he doesn't get it as leader.
Sue, we've just heard that John Hemming, of course, lost his seat in Birmingham Yardley, has said that Nick Clegg made strategic errors and has already called on him to go. Now, we were discussing earlier that, of course, it's all very well suggesting that Nick Clegg goes, but there's not many MPs left to pick a leader from, so that could be complex. What's your sense on, you know, whether Nick Clegg will stay or whether other people want him to go?
I suspect he will go, actually. I think it'll be very, very hard for him to stay. But I was thinking exactly that you have, you know, in the Lib Dem party, if you're an MP, you had a 1 in 57 chance of being leader. Now it's like 1 in 10. I mean, I'm assuming that Tim Farron is clearly going to be the man to do that. And therefore, as you know, he's not the kind of guy who would necessarily be sitting down calmly and politely and doing a deal in there if it needs to be done. Though, of course, we think of this, you know, there's a slim majority for the Conservatives. Perhaps they won't need it, but you're right. A slim majority of the Conservatives can be a very, very dangerous thing, and there will be friends in the DUP and the Lib Dems that David Cameron might well need, and that'll be, I think, a tad more difficult if Tim Farron is the leader.
All right, Sue, thanks very much indeed. Sue Jemison there at number 10 Downing Street. It has been a dramatic and unexpected night and morning so far. How does this translate into forming a government? Julie Etchingham is looking at the national picture. We'll bring us those results in just a moment. Plus, we'll have reactions from key locations across the whole of the UK. Lorraine is in Glasgow. Ben's live on the River Thames with the people who really matter in all of this, the voters.
Yeah, so Susanna, I've traded you in for our undecided mums. We've been following them across the campaign. They weren't sure who they were going to plump for on polling day. They did it yesterday. We're going to be finding out exactly who they chose and why very shortly.
Let's take a look at how things stand across the country. Julie Etchingham has the details in the ITV News studio.
Yes, we've got all sorts of things we can show you in terms of how we can reflect the drama of the night. We thought, first of all, at this stage, we'd show you some of our maps, which give a picture of how the voters shifted very clearly in the colours of the major parties from 2010 to 2015, this election that few of us will forget. So look at these maps now. These are the snapshot of the Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem and UKIP vote from 2010. You can see where those areas of real strong support there were for Labour up there in Scotland, the Lib Dem heartlands down there in the southwest, the Tory swathe of blue and just that little nibble of UKIP. Let's have a look then at how these maps have changed overnight in terms of the shares and the colours of the vote. So that was 2010 and this is 2015, and just look at that. Look at the way the Labour map has changed, all but wiped out in Scotland. Liberal Democrat, that map has just gone terribly, terribly pale, hasn't it? Southwest really could barely a flicker of yellow, and of course in close-up around London you'd barely spot anything. So a real contrast between 2010 and 2015. That's what we've seen seat by seat overnight on those that have been declared. And of course the big story really of the night is what has happened in Scotland, near wipeout of Labour. Let's have a look at the battleground that we've been consulting overnight, and as we predicted, Tom, of course we just thought that the graphics department would be using an awful lot of bright yellow, and so it has turned out. You can see that the Conservatives have held their seat in Dumfriesshire. Edinburgh South, Ian Murray held on there, even though the SNP were chasing him hard. Still waiting for that one result in Berwickshire. But, you know, Kirkcaldy, for example, Gordon Brown's old seat has gone to SNP. Orkney, the Lib Dems held on there too. But the rest of it, just a swathe of bright yellow. And there, in bold colour, is one of the stories of the night.
Isn't it just, Julie? Thank you. The SNP, of course, you know, making huge gains in Scotland, all but wiping Labour off the political map. Lorraine is there this morning. The Scottish people have spoken loud and clear, Lorraine.
They certainly have a remarkable result. There used to be the old joke that there was more Scottish pandas than Scottish Tory MPs. We've got 2 pandas in Edinburgh Zoo. Now there's actually more Scottish pandas than Labour MPs. And Asma Mir is with me. Asma, you've been at the counts. This is unprecedented, isn't it?
It's absolutely unprecedented, not just because at the beginning of the night people were saying, oh, they might take 6 out of the 7 Glasgow seats. Not only did they take them all, they were taking them all by 10,000, majority. And some of these seats have been Labour since the 1930s, but none of that meant anything tonight. It was an absolute landslide. Just about every, seat that went from Labour to SNP went by 10,000. Amazing swings in the beginning of the night. We were saying, oh, they'll never get that because they need a 27% swing. They were getting 35, 39%. I mean, I've never seen anything like it in my life.
And massive turnout, particularly among young voters.
That's right, absolutely. Again, in terms of Glasgow, though, it's funny how we look at turnouts of like 55 and 60% and say, oh, that wasn't very high, because we were spoiled by the referendum completely. Yes. But it's interesting, it's a kind of double-edged day and victory for Nicola Sturgeon, because she's won resoundingly in Scotland, but she may not be required after all in England, in the UK. So an interesting night for her.
No, very much so. We're going to be talking to her later on. Let's just go over here and talk to some of our voters. We've got Lily Brown and Bobby over here. Both SNP voters, both clearly delighted.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why did they get it so right? What happened? Why did you turn out? Why did people vote SNP?
I think they voted SNP because Labour have got it so wrong in past years.
we had Tony Blair in the Iraqi war, and so that's what.
Do you think that was
a
people have been
for Labour
today?
Yeah. I mean, this is them 3 times in the chair. What does that tell you? The people have just had enough. They've won their mind out. They want to vote, and it's Scotland doing its thing.
Do you think then that independence is inevitable? Do you think you'll see it in your
lifetime? Yeah, I've been wanting that for many a year. I don't see why we shouldn't be. The finances here, the education's here, the youth's here. Well, it's inevitable. It has to come.
They've called it a quiet revolution, but it's actually been quite noisy, hasn't it?
Well, it has, yeah. Even Europe's looking at it as well. You know, there's big commerce coming in all over the world to our little 4.5 million. You know, there's 323 seats, gets me.
Mr. Cameron, how are you feeling?
Scotland's only given 50 odds or 60 odds. Even if we'd won them all, we still couldn't get to Westminster. So you get 60 million English.
We're actually, if I can just interrupt, you've seen pictures of David Cameron arriving, and clearly it must be not here, and Samantha Cameron as well. It looks like he's going to have enough MPs to actually form a government on his own. That's the indications. That are the indications. Rachel Armistead is here. You're a sort of expert in voting trends. Why was there this massive SNP surge?
3 factors, really. Powers, personality, poverty. Powers, we know that most people in Scotland, including many no voters, want the Scottish Parliament to have more powers. Voting SNP seen as the best way of ensuring that. Personality, Nicola Sturgeon's personal ratings are phenomenally high and much higher than either Jim Murphy's or Ed Miliband's. And poverty, the SNP has really successfully positioned itself as the anti-austerity vote option in Scotland and has really, I think, taken the ground away from under Labour on that front.
And if the Tories do manage to get enough to form a government, we're a nation divided, aren't we?
We are, and certainly in terms of the constitutional debate, we're far from the end of that, I think.
OK, we'll be talking to Nicola Sturgeon later on. Back to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Lorraine. Let's get the very latest election headlines with Ranveer.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Good morning. David Cameron and his wife Samantha have just arrived at Tory headquarters. As you can see there, the Conservatives are this morning on course to be the single biggest party in the Commons. These are the latest pictures we are seeing. He is there with his wife entering into party headquarters. He is expected this morning to possibly have a majority of 2.
We published a manifesto that was squarely for working people. That is what we put in our manifesto. That is what I hope we'll be able to implement in government.
The Scottish National Party have won a landslide victory in Scotland and will become the 3rd biggest party at Westminster. And the former Labour Foreign Secretary Jack Straw says Ed Miliband should consider his future. He said the party faced a desperate situation in Scotland and a pretty depressing situation in England and Wales. It has also been a disastrous night for the Liberal Democrats, who are facing who have already lost more than 40 of their seats. Some very, very big names have gone, Vince Cable among them. Nick Clegg said he would be talking to his party about the future of his position in the party later this morning.
All right, thanks very much indeed, Ranveer. Let's go over to Tatton in Cheshire, where the Chancellor George Osborne has retained his seat. Very good morning to you, Mr. Osborne. What is your current, smile on your face, what is your current prediction for how many seats you might have won at this stage?
Well, I don't know. We've still got some results coming in, but we're winning some seats that, I don't think anyone expected us to win tonight. So as the early hours of the morning give way to the time when lots of other people are getting up, we'll just wait and see. But it's clearly been a really good night for the Conservatives. And, we are going to get straight back to work with the task that the British people have asked us to undertake, which is to finish the job on repairing the economy, making sure the economy works for everyone, that we build, as David Cameron was saying, one nation, and we of course deal with issues like our United Kingdom and how we bring it together. So these are our big tasks, and we will get back to work.
George, you well know that political journalists like to joke and wind up David Cameron in private that his worst nightmare is a Tory majority of 3 or 4, and joking aside, that's not going to be easy for you to manage, is it? And will you be tempted, you think, to still go and talk to the DUP even if you've got a majority? Because if the last 5 years has taught you anything, surely it's that having a decent majority is very helpful.
Well, good morning, Tom. Look, let's see what the results are, and let's wait to hear David Cameron, who will be speaking later this morning. But look, we set out to get an overall majority. I did interviews with you and many other people saying we could achieve that overall majority. It was one of our central messages in this campaign, that there was a stable majority government available to Britain. And if we've achieved that majority, that enables us to implement our manifesto, which we stood on, and I think that creates accountability in our political system, and there won't need to be, all the kind of horse trading you get in other arrangements. But let's see. We are still getting the results in, and it's clearly been a very good night for us. But as I say, we're now focused on the task ahead. And if you listen to David's speech in Witney, accepting his becoming the MP there, he was very clear about the task ahead. He used that phrase "One Nation" to sum up both the economic challenge of making sure everyone benefits from the recovery, and of course, if you like, the United Kingdom challenge, because of the results in Scotland are clearly one of the other striking features of this general election.
Being honest with us, are you a little bit surprised to be looking at a majority this morning?
Well, I always thought it was possible. If I told you, I was absolutely, it was a dead cert in my mind, then I wouldn't be telling you entirely the truth. But, that's what happens in elections, actually. If you have a clear message, if you have great candidates, the British people, reward you for that. And I think for me in particular, although we've lost a couple of really great Conservative colleagues, lots of other great new Conservative MPs have been elected, and you're going to see a whole new generation of talent. Let's put it this way. There was a big smile on my face when the exit poll came through, and then when some of the results started coming through to confirm the exit poll, the smile stayed there.
Isn't it true that ultimately what swung it for you was the fear you put into people about what a Labour SNP administration would actually be like? And isn't the truth that that's going to cause you an awful lot of complications in the next few years?
No, I don't accept that, Tom. I mean, if you look at this campaign, not only did we set out positive policies on childcare and home ownership and helping working people keep more of their taxes, we also had a really strong economic record to run on. And in the end, the economy was the central issue that voters, I think, focused on, because they knew that without an economy that was strong, you couldn't have a strong NHS and other vital public services, and you couldn't help people get back to work. It was also clear, I thought, as the campaign went on, that David Cameron was the outstanding candidate to be our Prime Minister. And so those issues of economy and leadership, which obviously are very closely linked, I think were pretty decisive. And in the end, I think Labour and Ed Miliband were unable to convince people that they could govern without the support of Scottish nationalists, and that was not an arrangement that I think the people of this country ultimately wanted to see. So it was, I think, a pretty sensible judgment by the people of this great country.
George Osborne in Tatton, thank you very much for joining us.
Let's talk to former Cabinet Secretary Lord O'Donnell, who was responsible for brokering the deal between the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats back in 2010. But it looks this morning, and from what George Osborne is saying as well, although he said he wouldn't be telling the truth if he thought it was a dead cert that they would get a majority, but it looks like they might have one.
Most certainly, and the way it's panning out is one of the relatively straightforward scenarios. My successor will have been going through all sorts of much more complicated things. So this looks like we're in the world of small Conservative majority, where the emphasis must be on how does the Conservative Party maintain party unity through issues like Europe. It reminds me very much of the days when I was John Major's press secretary. He won the '92 election against the odds, and indeed the exit poll, as I think we'll find out this time, the exit poll actually got it wrong and underestimated the Conservative performance, which seems to be the case again here. So I think he'll be looking back and saying, so how do you manage with small majorities when Europe is going to be one of the key issues for the next Parliament?
Just tell us what David Cameron then, with that as a prediction and a projection, what will David Cameron be doing in the next couple of hours?
Right, well, he will need to think about forming a majority government. So the first thing is he will have thought about different patterns, coalition. This is his first opportunity to appoint all his own ministers. So that's a big plus for him. So he will be thinking OK, I've got a shadow cabinet, so this time I don't have so many of those rather difficult decisions about fitting in around a second party. He also needs to sort out, you know, there are lots of things that governments do all the time. There are, again, crises in Greece, so, you know, the continuity of government, he'll be looking at all of those issues.
Is independence now inevitable in time?
The election wasn't about independence. I made that clear consistently and repeatedly during the election. I said to people in Scotland that if they voted for us in this election, I wouldn't take that as an endorsement of independence. I'm not going to go back on that. This election was about making Scotland's voice heard, and the people of Scotland have certainly chosen to make their voice heard loudly.
And First Minister, how do you work with the Conservatives? Because obviously David Cameron will now be the Prime Minister, and you wins this election.
Our job is to stand up for Scotland against the Conservatives. I didn't want to see a Conservative government. Labour were unable to defeat the Conservatives in England. I think that makes it all the more important that we do have a strong team of SNP MPs to fight Scotland's corner and to stand up for Scotland, and that's what we plan to do.
You try and wreck the process in Westminster, though? That was Nicola Sturgeon there, the First Minister, who's just leaving her home here on the outskirts of Glasgow, making her way back into the centre of the city. It has been an incredible night for the SNP here, as we just move out the way to let First Minister's car off her drive. She has gained some 56 seats so far out of potentially 59 seats. The swing has been huge, almost 40% in some seats here in Scotland. So Scotland's voice is certainly going to be heard in Westminster, but just how will it be received?
Yeah, Jonathan, thanks very much indeed. It's an interesting question that Jonathan Swain just put there to Nicola Sturgeon, which is, of course, Scotland voted SNP, and there is, likely to be a Conservative government at Westminster. And people asking a question, is David Cameron going to be the last Prime Minister of the UK?
Well, I think from the SNP's point of view, remember the line they used during the independence referendum, which was the only way that the Scottish people can get the government they vote for is independence. And this will reinforce that message in Scotland. So I think you heard her there saying she's not going to use this as a vehicle for pushing for independence straight away. I think that doesn't surprise me at all. But they will be a powerful voice in Westminster. I think the fact that all of the logic around independence has changed somewhat. Remember, got a much lower oil price. If we were to look at the economics of it, it looks very different, much more unfavourable for independence for Scotland than it did pre the last independence referendum. But I think the fact that they've got such a strong voice in Westminster will be a big issue, because remember that first piece of legislation that comes before the House will be a big piece implementing the Smith report on further powers, devolution powers for Scotland. And I think David Cameron, in his acceptance speech, referred to the need to do that.
All right, Lord Goss O'Donnell, thanks very much indeed. So it's 7:30. Should we have a look at the weather? Laura's up on the roof.
Indeed, I am, yes. The view up here in the sky is that skies are starting to grey over. We've had some few spots of rain here, and it's all changed with our weather as we head through the weekend. We've got a cloud and rain spreading north today. Saturday is one of sunshine and showers. It can come Sunday, mixed fortunes, rain in the north, but turning much warmer in the south. This is how it looks right now. We've got a band of rain moving across the southwest of England and South Wales. That will journey north through the day, but to the north of here, it is dry, yes, sunny, yes, but also fairly chilly. Make the most of the dry, sunny weather if you've got it, because through the day our band of rain will quickly march northwards through central southern England, Wales, the Midlands, later into northern areas of England. A thoroughly wet afternoon to come, with temperatures fairly mild in the south and east. As we head through the weekend, like I said, Saturday is one of sunshine and showers, fairly hit and miss. Come Sunday, though, rain across northern and western areas and turning warmer, 19 degrees across the south and east. High pressure builds into next week and turning warmer still.
Find out more about the weather for where you are at itv.com/GMB.
"7:31, you're watching Good Morning Britain election 2015, and it is an unexpected morning. David Cameron and the Conservatives may be able to stay on with a slim majority.
Labour and Ed Miliband have had a disastrous night, particularly in Scotland, where the party's been almost wiped out by the Scottish National Party led by Nicola Sturgeon, who is expected to take all but one of the seats.
And Nick Clegg's future hangs in the balance, with the Liberal Democrats expecting to see their worst defeat in almost 3 decades. Dan Rivers has the latest on the election results so far.
Even before most of the results were in, David Cameron was beaming with confidence as it became clear the polls were wrong and the Conservatives were exceeding their most optimistic predictions.
This is clearly a very strong night for the Conservative Party. I think we've had a positive response to a positive campaign.
Although we've lost a couple of really great Conservative colleagues, lots of other great new Conservative MPs have been elected, and you're going to see a whole new generation of talent.
It made for a grim night for Ed Miliband, annihilated in Scotland and unable to make up the difference across England and Wales.
Miliband Ed, Labour Party, 20,708 votes.
I'm deeply sorry for what has happened. And I also want to say that the next government has a huge responsibility. It has a huge responsibility in facing the very difficult task of keeping our country together.
His loss was her gain, Nicola Sturgeon pulling off one of the most spectacular political coups in modern British electoral history. SNP scalps included a brace of Alexanders, Douglas Alexander, Labour's Shadow Foreign Secretary, and Danny Alexander, the Lib Dem Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Labour's leader in Scotland, Jim Murphy, was also out, as was former Lib Dem leader Charles Kennedy.
What we are witnessing here in Scotland is a historic shift in the political firmament.
By the time Nick Clegg arrived at his Sheffield Hallam count, his party had been devastated. And he only narrowly hung on to his seat after a strong challenge from Labour.
That Nick Clegg has been duly elected. Thank you.
It is now painfully clear that this has been a cruel and punishing night for the Liberal Democrats.
One he said had implications for his position in the party. Vince Cable among those swept aside by a wave of hostility towards the coalition partners after 18 years as MP for Twickenham. And Simon Hughes, another high-profile Lib Dem casualty, stunning defeats that have left the party reeling. It's still not clear if David Cameron will have enough seats for an overall majority, but this morning it is the Conservatives who are out in front as the final results come in. Dan Rivers, Good Morning Britain.
So we are going straight to Brighton Pavilion, where it looks as if Caroline Lucas is back, the Greens' only MP. Or am I getting ahead of myself? Let's just watch what's happening exactly in Brighton Pavilion.
Clarence Eden Mitchell, the Conservative Party candidate, 12,448. Howard Pilot, the Socialist Party of Great Britain, 88. Purna Sen, Labour Party, 14,900. Thank you. That was 14,904. Nick Yeomans, Independent, 116. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows: want of official mark, 36. Voting for more than permitted, number 53. Unmarked or uncertain, 97.
Back in Brighton Pavilion. She has fought very, very hard for that. It was by no means a guaranteed thing, and she has got back. May end up being the Greens' only MP. Natalie Bennett, the party's leader, for example, despite lots of national coverage, did not make it in Holborn and St Pancras. But the party will be extremely relieved that Caroline Lucas has got back there. And although I don't have my specs on, so I can't see the figures, that looks reasonably convincing. Yes, I'm told she's increased her majority. Let's maybe hear what she's got to say.
I'd like to thank the returning officer and her staff for all of their amazing work in this election and all their very, very hard work into the early hours of this morning. I'd also like to thank the other candidates for the way they've conducted their campaigns, and I hope in the future that we'll have the chance to work together for the benefit of the city. But of course I want to say a huge thank you to my own supporters here tonight, across the constituency and beyond, who've worked so tirelessly during this campaign. There are so many to mention: Adam, my campaign manager, Kath, Steve, my agent, so many more. You know who you are. You have worked tirelessly. I have been privileged to work with you. Thank you so very, very much for all of the hours that you've put in. Tonight's victory is your victory. But I also want to pay tribute to my family for all their support. Richard, you are my rock. I could not have stayed the course without you. Isaac, Theo, thank you so much for all of your support and all of your love. 5 years ago, I stood here and said that together we in Brighton had made history. But tonight we've gone further. We've shown that not only can we win elections, but we can represent the people. 5 years ago, I also pledged to serve the people of this city as best I could.
Caroline Lucas, who has held her seat at Brighton Pavilion with an increased
majority,
votes. Meanwhile, here's number 10 Downing Street, and there's David Cameron's car arriving, and there indeed is the Prime Minister himself. We were speaking to the Chancellor a little bit earlier on, and he said that he'd be lying if he thought that getting the kind of results they've seen this morning he thought was a dead cert last night. The exit polls even might have underestimated a Conservative victory as well. So David Cameron, the happiest of the party leaders this morning, there as he goes to the door of number 10 Downing Street, pausing for a couple of photographs with his wife,
and back into their home, because to state the obvious, that is where they live, with their kids in the flat up there, and I don't suppose they've necessarily packed, so I don't know.
Well, Sue,
exactly
you were saying a little earlier, weren't you? You didn't think a stick of furniture would be moving from the residence behind you. I mean, he looks pretty comfortable.
That's right, and you know, it's quite interesting. I was with him in Wales just the other day, and I got the impression, you know, before we went on air, having a little chat with him, that he was very confident, and I have been told on good authority he is the first incumbent of Downing Street in many, many years not to have a bag packed, ready to go, and not to have started bringing in boxes and putting things in. Rather like, you know, you go into Labour, you've got your grab bag. He hasn't done that. Was that just sort of supreme confidence? Did he really believe he was going to be back here perhaps more than George Osborne did? But he did have that air of confidence. He said he was pumped up, as we know, for the last few days, even weeks of campaigning. I think he thought he'd get back with a minority government. I'm not sure he believed he'd have a majority, as the polls seem to indicate. But that is a happy man going back inside to sleep in his own bed tonight.
In which case, Sue, does he at some point go to Buckingham Palace to talk to the Queen in the next couple of hours, do you think?
Well, I suppose it's going to depend a little bit on what Ed Miliband says, isn't it? I mean, at some point there's going to have to be a concession there. We haven't actually got to the point where he said, I am now forming the next government. But as these results come in, it's going to, I think, become extremely clear. And yes, then he can go to the Queen and say that he is forming the next government. It's going to be quite problematic for him, even if he has a slim majority, because there are huge issues looming, particularly on the right wing of his party. Will he need to have any kind of alliance on a vote-by-vote basis with the DUP? What about the poor slaughtered Lib Dems? Does he need them for anything? I suspect he's looking happier now than he will down the line, particularly getting anywhere near that Europe referendum.
Indeed. All right, Sue, thanks very much indeed. Sue Jameson there. As we were saying, David Cameron and his wife just gone back through the door of number 10.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying we've just had Brighton Pavilion there, Caroline Lucas getting back, but as far as I'm aware, we haven't had the two other Brighton seats through, and seats like that still to come may actually be quite important, because we're predicting 327 for David Cameron as a majority. That's really, really, really tight. If he can begin to push up the majority into 330 or whatever, well, I'm just being told that Hove Labour gained. So we're in the territory now where literally every vote. I mean, I don't know how many by-elections there've been in this Parliament, but something like 15 or 16. What that means is David Cameron is going to lose his majority in the not too distant future.
Wow. Well, if you're joining us at 7:41, you probably are a little surprised this morning, because we're waking up to a few surprise results. So Ben has gone down to the River Thames to get some reaction from the people who matter, the people who actually put their X's in the boxes, as opposed to the politicians, of course, who vote as well. But what happened then, Ben, with our undecided voters?
Well, our undecided mums all got to the polling booth and they made their decision. We're going to be talking to them a little bit later, Susanna. One or two of them were voting tactically, which is something we've heard quite a lot this morning. We wanted to get the opinion as well, though, of former Home Secretary Jackie Smith, who joins me now. Tough morning for you this morning, because you've got to come and you've got to answer questions from people like me. How do you describe what's happened to Labour?
It's not been a good night at all, and, you know, thinking back 5 years, my heart goes out to people like Jim Murphy and Douglas Alexander. You know, I know what it's like to stand on that stage and lose your seat. But I think the important thing to remember is, one, there's life for them after Parliament. That isn't the end of their political lives, I'm sure. More importantly, I think, for Labour, if it turns out that we haven't been successful in this election, look, you know... If it turns out. I've been in the Labour Party 35 years. I joined in 1979. I had to wait 18 years before we got a Labour government. I don't think I'm going to have to wait 18 years for the next one.
What about the leadership? Are we looking at praise for the Tories running an incredibly successful campaign, or criticism to Labour for getting it wrong, and particularly how much of that criticism could be laid at Ed Miliband's door?
Well, look, in many ways, I think it was a very good campaign. I know that there are, you know, thousands of activists out there who knocked on hundreds of doors. Ed Miliband
hasn't translated into votes, though.
Well, you know, Ed Miliband asked us to do 4 million conversations. We did more than that. So I think there is going to have to be a very careful look at what went wrong, what went differently, incidentally. Because in London, of course, there were some very good results. We took seats from the Lib Dems and the Tories. Clearly in Scotland and in parts of the Midlands, it went very badly.
Your hunch in terms of leadership, how long has Ed Miliband got? If he steps down or has to go, who would you like to see take the reins?
I think it's too early, to be honest, Ben, to talk about that. I mean, I think Ed Miliband will be thinking very carefully about the situation, because it's a pretty bad night for Labour. But I think, you know, as far as the Labour Party is concerned, as I say, from my perspective of history at my old age, you know, there's hope in the future, as long as we think hard and renew.
They'll be desperately trying to cling on to that hope. Jackie, thank you for joining us this morning. I'm joined over here by James Khan, of course, former Dragon, and Pat Kane, one half of Hue and Cry. Labour of Love, of course, one of your great hits. There was a lot of love for the SNP, but no Labour. Barely any Labour left north of the border.
The full chorus was "Withdraw my Labour of Love." You may remember.
And that's what they've done, quite impressively. Your reaction, first of all, to the success of the SNP?
I'm very proud of a lot of people who I know who were in the Yes movement. I call them the Yes MP rather than the SNP, because they've swollen with the energy of that broad cross-party movement. I'm happy for them. I think it's a great voice from Scotland. I am a bit disappointed. I think part of the vote for the SNP was a vote for a progressive politics in Westminster. And I think that was the majority preference. People wanted an arrangement, not a deal, not a coalition.
But you'd quite like to see them in some sort of arrangement, certainly with Labour?
And funny enough, so the idea of a progressive agenda might have involved anti-austerity, it might involve cancelling Trident, but it might have involved the reform of the whole of the island in terms of democracy, federalism, voting system.
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge to Cameron now. I noted that he was being very one nation and saying we need to take the whole nation forward. But I think if he wants to save the union, I think he needs to profoundly reform the union, and that's his option.
That's a big discussion, isn't it? James, from the city's perspective, business as usual, I'd imagine that this is going to go down quite well.
I think it'll go down extremely well. I think what we've seen here is people voting for consistency and stability. And I think the general economy right now, we are doing so well. We're probably the strongest nation in Europe. And I think what people have voted for today is, if it ain't broke, let's not fix it.
That's certainly what they've done in their drove. So that's all from us for the time being down here. Join us a little bit later when I will be talking, Susanna, to those undecided mums, just to find out exactly which way they swung when it came to writing that cross on the ballot paper.
Indeed. All right, Ben. Look forward to hearing from them. Thanks very much indeed. Let's catch up with the election headlines now with Ranveer.
Yeah, 7:46. There are still 53 counts to go, but this is how we stand this morning. David Cameron is preparing for another term as Prime Minister, as he's just returned to number 10. Those are the latest pictures you are seeing right there. The Conservatives are on course to have a majority, we're now predicting, of 329.
We published a manifesto that was squarely for working people. That is what we put in our manifesto. That is what I hope we'll be able to implement in government.
A dramatic night saw the Scottish National Party sweep Labour out of almost all of its strongholds north of the border.
Our job is to stand up for Scotland against the Conservatives. I didn't want to see a Conservative government. Labour were unable to defeat the Conservatives in England. I think that makes it all the more important that we do have a strong team of SNP MPs to fight Scotland's corner and to stand up for Scotland.
Ed Miliband's future as Labour leader is under intense scrutiny after what he conceded has been a disappointing and difficult night. They lost 46 seats so far. Nick Clegg's leadership also of the Liberal Democrats could also be drawing to a close after a disastrous night for his party. A very well-known scout, Vince Cable, lost his seat among them. He said he would talk to his colleagues about his own future later this morning. Ladbrokes have got their odds out, by the way, on Ed Miliband to go outside Westminster. It says 2 to 5 to go today. Right. And they've got down there David Miliband 20 to 1 to return as leader.
What do you think, Tom?
Well, that's a bit of a bold... I don't think I'd bet on that myself, no. I mean, well, listen, anything's possible the way things are going today, but I wouldn't have thought that's very likely. Apart from anything else, he seems to have quite a nice life in New York. He's about to go and work for Hillary Clinton. Right, but it's interesting, isn't it, that this election result has put so many political leaders in jeopardy. If Nigel Farage doesn't win Thanet South, and we're expecting that declaration in the next couple of hours, then he has said he would resign as leader of UKIP. Ed Miliband, a much worse, I mean, a disastrous night gone, really, I think.
For Labour. Nick Clegg, although he hung on to his seat, has lost so many MPs, and not just so many MPs, but so many members of the coalition government, people like Vince Cable, Ed Davey, Danny Alexander. Then we look at the result for the Greens. Caroline Lucas, former leader, of course, of the Green Party, is the only Green MP. So what does that mean for Natalie Bennett, the leader who took part in the debates?
Not much, I suspect, in terms of her future. No, you're right, and I you know, in a way, the question the Labour Party has to ask itself, or answer, if you like, is a pretty big one about the direction of the party. Actually, really, who they choose to lead them may determine whether they're tilting back towards New Labour or whether they're sticking with Ed Miliband's slightly more leftish attitudes.
Two political leaders who've had an excellent night. Nicola Sturgeon, of course, leader of the SNP, and David Cameron, the Prime Minister. And breaking news now, there are reports that he's expected to go to Buckingham Palace to meet with the Queen later today. Kylie Pentelow is there at Buckingham Palace. Are you expecting him soon, Kylie?
We are hoping so. In fact, we saw him driving past about half an hour ago. Now, it's just worth mentioning that while the people, of course, elect our MPs, it is down to the Queen to appoint our Prime Minister. Now, she's not actually here at Buckingham Palace at the moment. She's a safe distance away from the politicians at Windsor Castle. Now, the parties have already been told not to approach the palace unless they're confident that they can form a government. And then the new Prime Minister comes here to Buckingham Palace. And as you said, we expect that to be David Cameron later today. Since 1952, she has presided over 12 prime ministers, the 11 men and 1 woman who have led the country through war and peace, boom and bust. When elections have clear-cut winners, it's a straightforward process. The Queen meets the Prime Minister and the palace announces they kissed hands on appointment.
In the coach sat the radiant girl who in her own right is Queen Elizabeth II.
Around 2 weeks later, she travels to Westminster, where the ceremony and pomp continues as the Queen leads the state opening of Parliament. There she makes her speech, setting out the government's proposed policies, and MPs vote on it before the next session of Parliament can begin. But what of elections with no clear winner? Quite simply, the Queen keeps out of it, and it's up to the politicians. Now, although the Queen isn't here at Buckingham Palace, royal sources tell us that she does keep a close eye on the results and might even watch those overnight programmes. So who knows, Tom and Susanna, she might just be watching us right now.
She might be. Stranger things have happened. I think it is worth saying that most people probably went to bed last night thinking that we'd be days away from a government, if not weeks away from a government. Actually, we're waking up to the fact that the new Prime Minister, the same Prime Minister, may well have gone to the palace and be installed by lunchtime.
Indeed. So we'll bring you all the latest developments, of course, still to come. Kate's outside Labour Party headquarters.
Well, indeed, we're pointing the camera this way because this is where Ed Miliband is expected to arrive, well, in the next few minutes, really, and he's going to walk into Labour headquarters here, past all these cameras, if we can spin round, and they're all going to have only one question to ask him: are you going to resign? We've already seen many of the campaign members already going in, looking frankly near to tears, I have to say. They were expecting a party, and this is turning into a wake, so we're going to bring you the latest a little bit later on.
Watching Good Morning Britain, our coverage of election 2015, and alongside me, ITV News' political editor Tom Bradby. Well, dramatic night, and we've just seen David Cameron and his wife go back into number 10.
Preparing to go to the palace, possibly. And I think it's worth saying that possibly some drama still to come. We're putting a projection up on screen, but it is still a projection that the Tories are going to have 329. They still have quite a lot of seats to get to that number, and any seat they don't make, and one or two of them haven't necessarily gone the way of the prediction, makes it much harder to govern, and much harder to govern for any length of time. We've also got the possibility, we've had another recount in Morley and Outwood, which is Ed Balls' constituency. We're told there are 200 votes in it. So we've had drama all night. We may yet have drama going on this morning.
Well, let's talk about one of the smaller parties, the Green Party. Only have one seat so far. Their leader, Natalie Bennett, only managed third place in the seat that she was contesting. But their one MP, the former leader of the Green Party, Caroline Lucas, joins us now from Brighton, where you kept your seat at Brighton Pavilion, which I understand with an increased majority. So congratulations to you. You must be disappointed, though, that the Greens haven't done better, especially considering that your leader took part in so many high-profile events, including, of course, the television debates.
Well, nearly 1 million people voted Green across the country. I think that's quite an achievement. We came a very solid second in 4 constituencies. I think it's been a good night. Of course, I think one of the lessons from this evening is absolutely the need for electoral reform. It makes absolutely no sense that a party can get almost 1 million votes but only 1 seat in Parliament, and I hope very much that in the coming days and weeks that issue of electoral reform will be at the top of the political agenda.
Caroline, I don't mean to be rude, but a lot of people didn't find Natalie Bennett's leadership during this campaign very impressive. Wouldn't it be better if you were leader again?
Natalie Bennett went up and down the country, mobilising people in an extraordinary way. In the course of the last year, we've seen our membership grow from around 12 or 13,000 a year ago to 63,000, I think it is now, in England and Wales today. So, you know, I think she's done a pretty good job of mobilising those people, getting them out to vote. I think the bigger lesson is around our electoral system, the fact that it is broken, the fact that really the whole election was dominated by the politics of fear. You know, what we heard from the other parties the whole time was basically a message that said, you know, you can't afford to vote for the other ones. Here in Brighton Pavilion, we ran a really positive campaign, and I think that's been reflected in the result tonight.
There was absolutely no doubt you ran a very good campaign in Brighton Pavilion, not least because it was absolutely not a given that you were going to win. A lot of people thought it would be quite tight. You have won, but you had high hopes in Bristol West, you had high hopes in Norwich South, you had acres of national publicity. It just hasn't happened. That must be immensely frustrating for you.
I wouldn't agree that we had acres of national publicity. We did get into the leader debates, and I'm grateful for that. And Natalie used that opportunity to put climate change and the environment on the political agenda, which no other party did. I think what makes me sad today is that essentially what we need to do is have an alternative to the politics of austerity and more cuts. Looks like we're going to have another 5 years of those. And we're also going to have another 5 years of not putting the environment and climate change at the heart of the agenda. That is the tragedy of tonight. And I come back to the point that I keep repeating, that the lesson really is we need to find a way of getting voting reform high on the political agenda.
Caroline Lucas, thanks very much indeed. It's time to have a quick look at the weather.
Good morning. Yes, and the view up here, 22 stories above you guys, is a pretty grey one this morning with rain on the way, and it heralds a change in our weather as we head through the next few days. We've got outbreaks of rain spreading north today, sunshine and showers come Saturday, and divided fortunes on Sunday with rain in the north and sunshine across the south and east. This is how it looks right now, with rain across the southwest of the UK spreading its way northwards. It'll turn heavy as we head through the day, particularly through Wales, the Midlands and the northern areas of England. To the south south of here, brighter weather will start to move in. A southwesterly flow means temperatures climbing to 16 or 17. And after a chilly start through Scotland and Northern Ireland, it'll be bright all day long with just 1 or 2 scattered showers. As we head through to Saturday, like I mentioned, sunshine and showers, some of them heavy, particularly late morning and early afternoon, but the showers should ease later on Saturday. Come Sunday, northern and western areas are looking cloudy and wet. The southeast, though, a little bit warmer with highs of 19 and turning even warmer next week.
Find out more about the weather for where you are at itv.com/GMB.
Welcome to Good Morning Britain, election 2015, and what's turning out to be one of the most dramatic election nights and mornings in a generation.
David Cameron is inching towards a second term at Downing Street as Prime Minister. Dozens of results are still to come in, but the Conservatives could gain a majority of just 2.
It's been a disastrous night for Labour and Ed Miliband, particularly in Scotland, where the party has been almost wiped out by the SNP. We'll be speaking to their leader, Nicola Sturgeon, in just a few moments.
The Liberal Democrats are expecting to see their worst defeat in almost 3 decades, with Nick Clegg's future very much hanging in the balance.
And his Cabinet Minister Danny Alexander, the man who helped negotiate the coalition deal amongst other high-profile Lib Dems who have lost their seats.
And could we see Nigel Farage stepping down as leader of UKIP if he fails to become an MP?
What does all this mean for our Parliament?
What deals are going to be made?
And what does it mean for you?
We've got everything you need to know.
Friday, 8th of May, live from ITV Studios. This is Good Morning Britain, Election 2015, with Tom Bradby and Susanna Reid.
Very good morning to you. Welcome to Good Morning Britain's election special. And alongside me, ITV News' political editor Tom Bradby. Very nice to see you. Have you with us this morning.
Very good to see you. It's nice to reach the morning, I have to say. It's been rather a long night, but it's nice to be in the morning. It's a brave new dawn,
well,
whichever way you look at it.
Through from the moment that you took over coverage, of course, last night with those exit polls, and how that has panned out through the night, and what viewers waking up this morning, watching us this morning, might be thinking, hang on, I went to bed and I thought there was going to be a big coalition deal, lots of parties talking to each other, offering different deals, but look at the electoral map there. The Conservatives, by some margin, the biggest party and possibly even commanding slim majority.
It's the beauty of democracy, isn't it? It's totally unpredictable. You never really know what you're going to get. That old truism that no one knows anything is proved to be correct once again. You know, what was the night? Well, we went into the little booth before we went on air to be told the exit poll. Our jaws hit the floor. It then went from there. The SNP sweeping Scotland, amazing scenes. The Liberal Democrats collapsing, amazing scenes we never thought we'd see. And even as we're here this morning, you know, it's not settled. I think that's the point that we kind of need to make clear. Yes, the Tories, David Cameron is almost certainly going to be in Downing Street again, but his majority looks to be narrow. We haven't got all the seats yet, and it could end up, you know, there are a few twists and turns yet to see, I think.
Well, what is clear, of course, is that the SNP have made huge gains in Scotland, all but wiping Labour off the political map, and Lorraine is there this morning with their leader, Nicola Sturgeon. Good morning.
Good morning to you, and First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is here. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Lorraine.
Spot on. Massive turnout. You know, the third biggest party in the UK. Did it surprise even you?
You know, the polls have been suggesting we were on course for a historic victory. Our own private polling has been suggesting that as well. But, you know, I guess I never really quite believed that we would overturn all of these massive majorities. So it's a fantastic feeling this morning. I think what we witnessed last night was a really historic shift in the tectonic plates of Scottish politics, and now we've got the opportunity to make Scotland's voice heard really loudly at Westminster.
Now, you were called by one newspaper the most dangerous woman in Britain. Do you think then that frightened voters down south to vote Tory, and maybe by extension you might have let David Cameron in?
I don't think so. Labour failed to beat the Conservatives in England, and Labour can't blame anybody else for that. Their vote is barely up. They haven't taken seats off
the Conservatives. You know, I was laughing to myself there when you said that I was described as the most dangerous woman in Britain. One of the UK papers, I think the Daily Telegraph, published a picture of me a few days ago with that, or something like that headline. It was this picture of me cuddling lots of wee babies, you know, so I looked really, really dangerous in that picture. I mean, we said all throughout this campaign, we want to make Scotland's voice heard, and we will do that. But notwithstanding that it looks as if David Cameron's heading back to number 10, we will work with others to try to get progressive politics more at the heart of Westminster, and to stand up to Tory policies, because the Tories have done a lot of damage to Scotland and other parts of the UK, and we'll be a strong voice standing up for social justice.
It's interesting you say that. Now Alex Salmond is back in.
He is
He's
indeed,
going to be at the
yeah.
head of 56 SNP MPs. Who's in charge then? Is it him or you?
No, I'm the party leader, but you know, any party leader that doesn't want Alex Salmond as part of their team is not a sensible party leader. Angus Robertson, of course, is the leader of our Westminster group. He was the leader of a group of 6 MPs. He's now the leader of a group of 56 MPs. Absolutely. You know, this is clearly an outstanding result for the SNP. You know, historic doesn't even quite cover it. We saw swings yesterday that have never ever been seen in the history of Westminster politics anywhere in the UK. But it's a good result for Scotland, because what's clear from the results, it's not just people who voted yes in the referendum that backed the SNP yesterday. A lot of no voters also backed the SNP, and I felt there was a coming together of the country to make our voice heard. And my message to people who voted for us and to people who didn't, we're going to do our best to represent Scotland and to make sure the country's voice is heard very loudly.
Do you think now, though, that independence is absolutely inevitable?
No, I don't. And I've said all throughout this campaign that this election wasn't about independence. I said very explicitly to people, if you vote for the SNP, I won't take that vote as an endorsement of independence. If Scotland's ever going to be independent, it will be because we vote for it in a referendum. This election was about making Scotland's voice heard. And as I say, the results show that many people who would have voted no, and who might vote no if the referendum was tomorrow, voted SNP because they saw the SNP and see us as the best way to represent Scotland at Westminster. And I'm not going to turn my back in any of the promises we made to people during the election campaign. We're going to do our very best for the people who've put their trust in us.
You've had no sleep. Will you get some time to celebrate?
Well, I'm heading down to London shortly. Obviously, today is the VE Day anniversary, so I'll be representing the Scottish Government at the commemorations at the Cenotaph this afternoon. A very important day, and you know, I think everybody's thoughts across the country will turn to that anniversary. Over the weekend, I hope to get some time with our new MPs to celebrate and to, you know, start to look at how we make sure in earnest that Scotland's voice is heard.
Nicola Sturgeon, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Back to you.
Lorraine, thanks. Very interesting listening to Nicola Sturgeon, who said that a vote for the SNP in this election, she didn't consider a vote for independence. But many people will be wondering if this is the beginning of, you know, another referendum at some stage.
Well, she's been very consistent about that all the way before the election, through the election, and this morning. I think the big question, though, as you know, surely, is whether she decides to put another referendum on the ballot paper for the Scottish parliamentary elections next year. She's got quite a long time to think about it, and I think most close analysts of the Scottish political scene are pretty clear that she will only do so if she thinks she's going to win. She's not going to do it again if she doesn't win. And there are certain things that, despite the SNP surge today, amazing though that is, you know, I mean, I'm going to pluck the figures off the top of my head because I can't remember exactly, but at the time of the last referendum, I think that the SNP was predicting oil revenue would be something like 10 billion. I think it was only 600 million or something like that, something equivalent according to Treasury figures this year. That's a big hole, which makes winning the economic argument more difficult. But then again, you know, you see the result this morning and you wouldn't bet against the Scots voting to go independent, particularly if they've got a Tory government. So I think anything is possible.
OK, so that's the picture in Scotland. Dan Rivers has the latest on the election results across the UK so far.
Arriving back in London this morning and on course to remain as Prime Minister with an overall majority. It would appear coalition politics is over as the Conservatives exceeded their most optimistic predictions.
This is clearly a very strong night for the Conservative Party. I think we've had a positive response to a positive campaign.
This morning, Tory heavyweights were digesting the shock results.
Although we've lost a couple of really great Conservative colleagues. Lots of other great new Conservative MPs have been elected, and you're going to see a whole new generation of talent.
It made for a grim night for Ed Miliband, annihilated in Scotland and unable to make up the difference across England and Wales.
Miliband Ed, Labour Party, 20,708 votes.
I'm deeply sorry for what has happened. And I also want to say that the next government has a huge responsibility. It has a huge responsibility in facing the very difficult task of keeping our country together.
His loss was her gain. Nicola Sturgeon had a distinct swagger as it became clear the SNP had pulled off one of the most spectacular coups in British electoral history. SNP scalps included a brace of Alexanders, Douglas Alexander, Labour's Shadow Foreign Secretary, and Danny Alexander, the Lib Dem Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Labour's leader in Scotland, Jim Murphy, was also out, as was former Lib Dem leader Charles Kennedy.
This election was about making Scotland's voice heard, and the people of Scotland have certainly chosen to make their voice heard loudly.
By the time Nick Clegg arrived at his Sheffield Hallam count, his party had been devastated. And he only narrowly hung on to his seat after a strong challenge from Labour.
That Nick Clegg has been duly elected. Thank you.
It is now painfully clear that this has been a cruel and punishing night for the Liberal Democrats.
One he said had implications for his position in the party. Vince Cable among those swept aside by a wave of hostility towards the coalition partners after 18 years as MP for Twickenham. And Simon Hughes, another high-profile Lib Dem casualty, stunning defeats that have left the party reeling. This morning, it's looking increasingly likely that David Cameron will have just enough seats for an overall majority as the final results come in. Dan Rivers, Good Morning Britain.
Let's take a look at how things stand across the country. Julie Etchingham has the details in the ITV News studio. Julie.
Thank you. Let's take you through some of the graphics we've been using overnight and give you a snapshot of what's happened this morning. We can have a look, first of all, at what we called our Commons calculator. We were thinking we might have to do all sorts of electoral maths to get to that magic figure of 326, which is the number of MPs you need to get to have a majority in the House of Commons. And in the end, the projections that we've had mean that we can get that Conservative figure over into the box. I'm just seeing if I'm pressing the right thing. It seems to have actually eluded me for the first time overnight. Maybe they can give me a help out with the graphics there. There we go. Up to 329. Now, that is our projection now, the prediction that we're saying on the basis of the results that have come in so far. And you can see that that gives the Conservatives a majority of 8. That is because there are the Sinn Féin MPs who wouldn't take their seats, and you don't count the Speaker in that. So we don't need to do any maths and add up a coalition or a rainbow variety of colours in there, because in the end, the Conservatives did it. Let's have a look at one of the other images of the night that we've contemplated, and some of the electoral maps, for example. These are the maps as they looked in 2010, with the sort of sweep of colours, that big stronghold for Labour in Scotland, of course. Let's have a look at how these maps have been left. Now we've got all these results in so far, and you can see Liberal Democrats washed out. Very, very pale hint of Labour red in Scotland after the march of the SNP, that extraordinary progress that they've made tonight. And just as a little view of exactly what that looks like in terms of seats, we'll take you to our SNP battleground, which is pretty much filled out now. And you can see that tide of bright yellow that swept right across that battleground. Still standing, the one Tory left in Scotland, Orkney, the one Lib Dem left there, and Edinburgh South, Labour still holding that seat. The rest, that tide of bright yellow, just shows you in an instant just what an extraordinary story Scotland has become overnight.
Just, Julie, thanks very much indeed. We are hearing that we are going to be getting a declaration in the Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls' seat in around 10 minutes' time. And we understand that that was, you know, quite hotly contested.
We were expecting it about 5 hours ago, so that's how tight it's been.
Yeah, indeed.
Down to a few hundred votes, we're told.
It has been a very, very difficult, some would say disastrous night, of course, for Labour, and Ed Miliband's leadership being questioned, of course, this morning.
Well, I think it's going to get a lot worse if Ed Balls goes as well, because whatever, you know, he's not always the most universally popular figure in all quarters, but he's a, you know, I would say a pretty impressive politician, and he's a big beast in the Labour Party. So to lose pretty much the whole of Scotland in terms of representation and Ed Balls in one night, and, you know, have a pretty bad night overall is really not good.
Indeed. Well, let's go to Downing Street. Sue Jameson, of course, there for us this morning. In contrast, Sue, the man who went in back through the door of number 10 not very long ago has had an extremely good night, David Cameron, much better than probably even he expected.
Yeah, he certainly looked very happy indeed, didn't he, as he came back through the door. He won't have a lot of time to rest on his laurels or his sofa. That sofa, of course, probably not needing to be moved now. The champagne's probably staying in the fridge for a bit because we still have around 40 seats we don't know the result of. And also, I think it would probably look rather bad form if he, you know, got in his car and whizzed off to Buckingham Palace before that and before Ed Miliband has really formally conceded that he has lost this. I have just been trying to find out from Downing Street insiders when he might feel that he can come out and make his declaration. They've said we've got no idea at all. However, there are certain things that are pressing on him, and one of them will be the markets. Totally buoyed up at the moment this morning about what has happened. In fact, the pound has had its biggest surge in one day since 2009, and he will want to capitalise on that. After all, the Conservatives, the party of big business in the city, and they don't want to let anything slip there. So yes, I think we will have quite a lot happening, but not for maybe an hour or two.
OK, Sue, thanks very much indeed. Yes, the declaration in Ed Balls' constituency, apparently, Morley and Outwood, is imminent. In fact, shall we have a look?
Yes, let's go and see what's happened.
I, Tom Reardon, Acting Returning Officer for the Morley and Outwood constituency, declare that the total number of votes given to each candidate was as follows. Balls, Ed, Labour and Cooperative Party, 18,354. Craven Arnie, Yorkshire First, 479. Jews, David Allen, UK Independence Party, UKIP, 7,951. Hemingway, Martin Francis, Green Party, 1,264. Jenkins, Andrea Marie, the Conservative Party candidate, 18,776.
Parliament, that is a staggering result. And by the way, I think we'll see that quite a few of his votes, when we look at the churn later, will turn out to have gone to UKIP, actually, who did pretty well there. But that is a simply startling, staggering result. A bad night for Labour just got a whole lot worse. Let's wait and see what he's got to say, but pretty close. You can see why they've gone for a recount there, but, I mean, Susanna, that's an amazing moment, quite honestly.
A couple of hundred votes in it. As you say, I mean, it has been a terrible night for Labour. They lost the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Douglas Alexander, in his Paisley and Renfrewshire South seat in the early hours of this morning. For many, that was a sort of a critical moment. And now they have lost their Shadow Chancellor, Ed Balls. It's going to be a very difficult morning as Ed Miliband, who of course kept his seat, Doncaster North, but Ed Balls has lost his seat at Outwood and Morley. And here is the woman who won it for the Conservatives speaking to voters.
Good morning. Gosh, hands shaking a little bit here. Thank you. I mean, up here this evening we've been thanking and clapping all the politicians, but I think we ought to put our hands together for the fantastic polling team in here who has worked the socks off this evening. So thank you, everybody. "2 years, and what a journey, really. I little lost for words, which is unusual for me. I'd firstly like to thank my amazing team. I've literally had hundreds of volunteers helping me the last 2 years, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys, so thank you so much. I'd also like to thank my wonderful mum, and also Sharon and Tom, who's just been looking after her after she's fainted. So, so thank you, Sharon and Tom. I'd like to thank my dad. He's one of the reasons I'm here today. He passed away in unfortunate circumstances, and this is what drove me to stand here today.
Speaking tonight,
so
who, dare I say, are somewhat lost for words because they simply did not expect to win. And Susanna, you and I were talking. I mean, we've seen big figure after big figure fall. We saw Vince Cable go down there in Twickenham, and you pointed out to me that you thought the winning candidate was actually crying, possibly at the thought of having displaced Vince. And I sensed that too. I also thought the returning officer down there almost seemed close to tears. I think the people who clearly feel the enormity of what's happening, even if obviously they're pleased to have won.
Thank you.
Of course, there was a moment, wasn't there, back in the 1997 election when Michael Portillo was displaced by the Labour candidate Stephen Twigg, and it's known as the Portillo moment, and perhaps this is the moment of this campaign.
Can I start by thanking the returning officer and all the counting staff? It's been a very, very long night, and so thank you to you for all staying on to finish this job here today. Thank you. And let me start by saying to my political opponents in Westminster, congratulations, and in particular to thank the other candidates, but to congratulate the new MP for Morley and Outwood, Andrea Jenkins. Andrea, you have fought a really decent campaign, and you've done so in a very good way. And I know you'll work really hard to be the Member of Parliament for Morley and Outwood, and you'll have the support of the constituency to do that very important job. So thank you for the way in which you've conducted this campaign. I'd like to thank all of my campaign team who've worked 7 days a week for 5 years, and my agent Neil Dawson, but all of the team. It's the best campaign team, and I'm hugely grateful. I'm just sorry we couldn't quite do enough to repeat what we did in 2010. And it's been a great honour to be the Member of Parliament for Morley and Outwood, and before that for Normanton. And I have found it a great privilege, and we've done some important things to represent individuals in times of difficulty or hardship, but also to make advances in this constituency and in Westminster. Any personal disappointment I have at this result is as nothing compared to the sense of sorrow I have at the result that Labour has achieved across the United Kingdom tonight in Scotland, but also in England and in Wales, and the sense of concern I have about the future. We will now face 5 years where questions will arise about the future of our union, about whether or not we can stay as a member of the European Union and fight for jobs and investment, whether we can make sure we secure our national health service at a time of public spending cuts. And those are real concerns to me and to many people across the United Kingdom. Even on this very difficult night, I would just like to say I've been proud to be a Labour and Cooperative Member of Parliament. And we have always been a party which has been internationalist, because we believe we solve problems by working with other countries to solve them. We've always been a party which believed in the union because the pooling and sharing of risk which comes from our union underpins justice and fairness. We've always been the party who founded the National Health Service and will do everything we can to secure the future of the National Health Service. Even on this difficult night, I'm sure the Labour Party will emerge in the coming weeks and months more united and more determined. And in the next few years, I think more than ever, we will need in Parliament and across the country a Labour Party absolutely determined to stand up for working people in this constituency and in our country. I am confident Labour will be back. Thank you very much.
That is a shattering blow for the Labour Party. I know Ed Balls, moderately well, and I can tell you for sure, I don't think for a single moment he imagined that was going to happen. He's a political dynasty, of course, married to Yvette Cooper. He's worked at the top of politics for 20 years. That is, and that looks like the end of his career, possibly.
Did I notice his voice slightly cracking with emotion, which wouldn't be surprising there as he gave that concession speech? He's, of course, the Shadow Chancellor, was a Shadow Chancellor. He'd been a former cabinet member under Gordon Brown and was a leadership contender when Gordon Brown stepped down as leader of the Labour Party. I mean, he's just one of the biggest names in the Labour Party and therefore a massive scalp.
He's still relatively a young man, and that might be the end of his political career.
OK, well, we're going to be going over to Labour Party headquarters to see if we can hear from the Labour leader, Ed Miliband. The result for Ed Balls there, just an example of what a disastrous night it has been for Labour. Still to come, Ben's on the River Thames.
Susanna, we've been intravenously feeding our mums caffeine to keep them awake. They're talking over the result, a result that's going to have ramifications for a long time to come. We're going to be also getting the opinions of all the people that have joined us here: Brian May, Richard Wilson, Jacqueline Gold, of course, and Anthony Worrell-Thompson. Grumpy Corner just over here, has to be said. Getting their thoughts on what's happened. And as well as that, broadcasting journalists Jane Moore and Janet Street-Porter. Jane, if I was to say... Oh, hi. If I was to say... I'm being in the Groucho, this, but everyone's a little bit more sober. If I would say one word to sum up the night, Jane?
For me, predictable.
Predictable for Jane, Janet?
Completely engrossing.
That's 2 words. But
well, there you go.
So look, we're going to be talking to everybody here a little bit later on to find out their thoughts in greater detail. Right now, though, we're going to get the news, travel and weather where you are. We'll see you in just a bit.
You're watching Good Morning Britain Election 2015. It has been a disastrous night for the Labour Party. Ed Balls, in the last few minutes, Shadow Chancellor, lost his seat to the Conservatives.
The party has been virtually wiped out in Scotland by the SNP, led by Nicola Sturgeon.
It's looking like the Conservatives will close in with a small majority to win David Cameron a second but possibly difficult term as Prime Minister.
And what next for Nick Clegg? There have been calls for him to resign as the Liberal Democrats expect to see their worst defeat in almost 3 decades.
So let's go straight to Downing Street. Sue Jameson, our political editor, is there. Very good morning to you, Sue. What do we expect David Cameron to do?
Well, I can now tell you with certainty that David Cameron is going to go to Buckingham Palace at 12:30. So in a few hours' time, clearly decided now that there's no doubt he can continue to be the next Prime Minister. He will then formally, of course, ask the Queen if he can form a government, and then he starts about trying to get his Queen's speech in order, which is going to happen towards the end of May. He's moving very quickly here. I did just ask a Downing Street insider whether he has spoken to Ed Miliband, because of course we haven't actually heard from Labour yet that they have conceded this. I was told they were not aware of that happening, which sometimes means, of course, these things might have happened with other people speaking to Labour, because we're still waiting for a couple of dozen results, so that's no doubt why they're waiting till 12:30. But, you know, he's obviously a man now who has no time on his hands at all. He's going to be very busy, particularly if he does get a tiny majority. That can be such a dangerous thing. He's happy today. It's going to be really difficult for him to sort this out, I think, further down the line, particularly with Europe.
Indeed. So, I mean, that's the situation with David Cameron. But just talk us through the results for the other parties, Sue. We've just seen Ed Balls lose his seat. And that's a symbol, isn't it, of what a terrible night it's been for the Labour Party.
Oh, absolutely. It's what we called, you know, from 1997, the Portillo moment. Ed Balls, the Tories really wanted to get him out of this seat. They made a very concerted effort to do it. And it suddenly makes that strong, confident statement from Ed Miliband a week or so ago. Ed Balls and I are going to be writing the Labour Party manifesto. Look, dreadfully redundant today. He is the biggest scalp to go, and I think it makes Ed Miliband's position even more tenuous, frankly. You had Alan Johnson, who is one of the really big Labour Party supporters, MP, who thought that Ed Miliband would have to go. But let's have a listen to what Ed Balls had to say.
Any personal disappointment I have at this result is as nothing compared to the sense of sorrow I have at the result that Labour has achieved across the United Kingdom tonight in Scotland, but also in England and in Wales.
And senior Labour figures have said Ed Miliband won't have to be told to go. I'd say it's just a matter of hours.
Sue, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's go straight over to Labour Party headquarters, and Kate is there. Has Ed Miliband arrived, Kate?
No, he hasn't, but many of his advisers have, and indeed what we believe are some bodyguards, all looking very grim-faced. In fact, one of them looked at me, recognised me and said, "Everyone smile." And I don't know if that's because I was saying earlier that people had come in looking very near to tears. And when that news about Ed Balls came through, there was an audible groan, let me tell you. This was supposed to be such an extraordinary day for them. There was press conference, there was speeches planned, all of that's up in the air and probably even out of the window when you look at what they're facing. The worst election result since 1987. Ed Balls, the man who was supposed to be writing the budget along with Ed Miliband this morning, now not even an MP. Douglas Alexander lost out to a 20-year-old. We are expecting Ed Miliband to come here very, very soon, and I think there will be one question everyone's asking: are you going to resign? I think that's very, very clear.
Kate, I wonder if anybody there is talking about who might replace him if he resigns.
Well, one of the names, ironically, was Ed Balls' Mrs. Yvette Cooper. She was very much talked about earlier on, and one of the names that's floating around. I get the impression, though, that even though outside of this HQ and outside of this particular campaign team that are gathering and trying to nurse their wounds, I wonder if those conversations are taking place elsewhere. For instance, Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, was one of the first, wasn't he, at about 3 a.m. this morning to suggest that maybe Ed Miliband's position is untenable. Several others have also come out, including Jack Straw, and said that those are the sort of people that are going to be having those conversations about replacing. Here, I think it's being felt as a very, very personal loss, actually, for Mr Miliband, because this was a very personal campaign run by the Tory press and by the Tories against him, everything from the way he ate a bacon sandwich to how much makeup he wore. And so whether or not they'll be thinking about who to replace him or whether or not be licking their wounds, I suspect it's going to be the latter right now. It really feels like a bit of a wake, actually. And when the people wander past, they're looking sort of bleary-eyed, bloodshot, as if they have been crying, and you don't know whether to jump on them and be a journalist or give them a hug, if I'm honest, because it is a terrible feeling of despondency, and rightly so. This is a terrible morning for the whole party.
Well, Kate, Susanna and I were just talking about it. You know, as you say, politics is a brutal business. None of these people, they've worked at the top of politics. Douglas Alexander, Ed Balls, Jim Murphy, they've been right at the top for many years, gone, and still young men and all the rest of it. We'll have to see.
And Douglas Alexander, of course, it was the election campaign chief. So he's going to feel this on so many levels, isn't he, as a very personal defeat.
Kate, thank you very much. Now, we reported earlier that the Prime Minister is said to be very soon on his way to Buckingham Palace to meet the Queen. Sometimes I really would give anything to be a fly on the wall for those conversations. Clearly that's difficult, but Kylie Pentelow is outside.
Yes, we are expecting David Cameron here around 12:30. Now, of course, we were expecting the Queen to have a much more interesting role in the possible case of a hung Parliament, but today it seems we're waking up to a much simpler picture. Now, the Queen isn't actually here at Buckingham Palace at the moment. She's a little bit further away from all the hubbub here in Windsor Castle. Now, it is just only a short matter of time before David Cameron arrives here. Now, royal sources tell us that the Queen pays quite a lot of attention to the results. So if she is at the moment, then I'm sure she will know who will be knocking at her door.
Well, I tell you one thing she's going to be discussing with her Prime Minister, I would imagine, is what's happening in Scotland. Although the Queen is above politics, as we know, I don't think it takes a genius to work out that she wasn't very keen on Scotland going its own way in the referendum. She's clearly going to have looked at what's happening in Scotland and want to talk about that with David Cameron.
All right, let's
she can't hear. Anyway.
No. as you say, it would be interesting to be a fly on the wall in that room. Meanwhile, let's talk about social media. Joanna Geary is from Twitter. Simon Milner is from Facebook. So, I wonder when people will be able to vote via social media, because that can't be very many years away. But in the meantime, Joanna, how are people reacting?
Well, first of all, it's just been so exciting. As an election, it's been quite a long run-in, and we've seen tons of people come to Twitter, both for campaigning, to gather around to comment on the election debates. And then we had a flood of excitement yesterday as people went to the polls, voted, tweeted out, "I voted," and you saw that lighting up across the country, which was really exciting. And then suddenly, 10 p.m, shock, like almost a gasp coming across Twitter, across the nation, as they realised that all the polls that had been coming out beforehand were completely different to the exit poll.
You should have been in our tiny office just before we went on air. Let me tell you, there was could have heard a pin drop.
It was incredible. We had one of the peak moments that night on the exit poll, but that rose steadily until the first result from Sunderland.
Simon, on Facebook, I wonder whether this... it's clearly the first election that people will have monitored social media, perhaps, for the results as much as any other form of media.
It's certainly the place where they go to talk with their friends about what's happening, and that's what we've seen at scale on Facebook, right through the campaign, actually. So we've seen well over 60 million interactions on Facebook about the election since the beginning of the year, and it just grew on election day, and I'm sure it will continue to grow as people kind of wake up, digest these results, and then let their friends know what they think about it.
It was interesting because sort of navigating the rules around Twitter and Facebook was interesting during the day yesterday and last night. I mean, for instance, you know, whether you were allowed to take a selfie and then post it, or what, you know, the rules were regarding broadcasting. It's uncharted territory in a way, isn't it?
In some respects, but I think a lot of voters actually got around it quite wonderfully with the dogs at polling stations. So we saw spring up a hashtag dogs at polling stations where people were marking the occasion in a very British way by taking a picture of their pet next to the polling station sign.
I tell you what I thought was really interesting was that one of the things that you get in the Twitter, Facebook age is that people have this hunger for almost minute by minute. I mean, if you follow the election on Twitter, in a way it was quite exhausting because every 30 seconds or few minutes somebody else was... And actually nothing was changing, but everyone wanted to get involved and all the rest of it. And I do wonder, actually, if we'll see polls outlawed as a result of this because they were so wrong, and some people will argue they're misleading.
I think there is a kind of demand and hunger to be part of that national moment. So people come on to Twitter to sort of discuss that with everybody else who's staying up and seeing the results come in over the night.
Are you able to monitor, Simon, the sort of electoral pulse via Facebook? Because, you know, as Tom was just saying, the predictions and the polls very different then from the exit poll. The exit poll quite different from actually the results as it's panning out. I wonder if you looked at the electoral pulse via social media, whether that was more accurate.
Yeah, one of the things that we could see is what were people talking about. So we knew how many people were talking about the election, around 12 million people on Facebook talking about the election during the campaign. But we also knew that the economy was the #1 issue. And that may have well led a pointer to who's going to win the election. But David Cameron was also far and away the most talked about leader. He was double any other leader in terms of who people were talking about. So I think you're right. In time, that kind of data can be mined more by yourselves and others to try and understand what's really going on here.
All right, interesting stuff. Simon Milner from Facebook, Joanna Geary from Twitter. Thanks very much indeed. 8:42. So still to come, Ben's on the River Thames with more reaction.
Susanna, thanks very much. I've got some of our more high-profile supporters with me. This end of the table, we're a little bit grumpy. Brian, frustrated by the results?
I'm very sad, very sad. I mean, the part of me that's Scottish is rejoicing because I think the Scots have taken a giant step further towards escaping from the tyranny of Westminster. What makes me sad as the part of me that's English is that we're going back into that tyranny. And it's a disaster for wildlife, there's no question about that. I think it's a disaster for the poor and the National Health Service, and I'm finding it hard to be positive.
No, that is only water, isn't it? We don't want anything worse than that. We don't want to go more down. Richard's not nailing his colours to the mast just yet. We'll be getting his thoughts. Much happier at that end of the table. Jacqueline, a positive result for the Conservatives?
Absolutely. I'm absolutely delighted as a businesswoman. I think this is a party that supports business. You know, that will mean more jobs, more financial security, and more importantly, a stronger economy.
OK, so there you go. A little brief thoughts from our celebrity voters here. After the break, I'm going to be chatting to Jane Moore and Janet Street-Porter, see what they think from a journalist perspective. We'll see you in just a bit.
Welcome back. Let's get up to date with the election headlines. Here's Ranveer.
Yes, thank you, Susanna. There are still 29 counts to go. But the breaking news in the last half hour, shocking news, in fact, the Shadow Chancellor, Ed Balls, has lost his seat. It was just by 422 votes to the Tories.
Any personal disappointment I have at this result is as nothing compared to the sense of sorrow I have at the result that Labour has achieved across the United Kingdom tonight in Scotland, but also in England and in Wales.
The other headlines, David Cameron will see the Queen at Buckingham Palace at 12:30 today to ask for her permission to form a new government. The Conservatives are on course to have a predicted Commons majority of 8, that's 320.
We published a manifesto that was squarely for working people. That is what we put in our manifesto. That is what I hope we'll be able to implement in government.
A dramatic night saw the Scottish National Party sweep Labour out of almost all of its strongholds north of the border.
I guess I never really quite believed that we would overturn all of these massive majorities, so it's a fantastic feeling this morning. I think what we witnessed last night was a really historic shift in the tectonic plates of Scottish politics, and now we've got the opportunity to make Scotland's voice heard really loudly at Westminster.
Ed Miliband's future as Labour leader is under intense scrutiny after what he's conceded has been a very bad result. And indeed, Nick Clegg's leadership of the Liberal Democrats could also be drawing to a close after a disastrous night for his party. They have lost 46 seats. He said he will be talking to his colleagues about his future later this morning.
It is now painfully clear that this has been a cruel and punishing night for the Liberal Democrats. The election has profound implications for the country. It also obviously has profound implications for the Liberal Democrats.
And you may be wondering why we're not really talking about UKIP this morning. The reason being that they've only got one MP so far. We're still waiting to hear about Nigel Farage. Mark Reckless, who defected from the Tories over to UKIP, lost his seat. And I'll throw this question to you, Tom. The big question about electoral reform will be this. UKIP have so far had more than 3.5 million votes across the country, one MP. The SNP, less than 1.5 million votes across the country. 56 MPs. How does that work out? People will be crying out about that, won't they, in the smaller parties particularly?
They will. I'm sure they will. The trouble with electoral reform is that, you know, every time it's raised, people quite like the idea of it, but we've only had one, chance. Nick Clegg, of course, brought forward a programme for electoral reform, not one that even he, I think, particularly believed in, I grant you. But at the end of the day, people, when it came down to it, said no thanks. I think the real difficulty is that people in this country have a very strong connection with the idea that you vote for your own MP, and I think that's going to be the difficult thing to shift.
But you look at what happened in Ed Balls' seat. Actually, we're saying he was ousted by the Tories, but in fact it's UKIP's biggest scalp, isn't it? Because they got 7,000 votes there.
Well, I think the sort of broader question, in a sense, is this the end of UKIP? If Nigel Farage, we were about to have Thanet South, if Nigel Farage does not win, then it's quite, I'm not saying he was UKIP, but he was charismatic. He was a leader that grabbed a lot of attention. It'll be difficult to see that going forward. The other thing, you mentioned Mark Reckless there. Of course, what Mark Reckless not getting back does is make it much less likely that other people might go and defect to the UKIP from the Tory party.
Well, indeed, as Ranveer says, there are going to be some voters who feel like their voice hasn't been heard or represented. So let's speak to some of them now. Ben is down on the River Thames with some of our undecideds before the election. How did they vote, Ben?
Susanna, Tom, thanks very much. We're going to be speaking to them in just a moment. Before we get there, Susanna, Jane Moore and Janet Street-Porter have been with us all morning. Jane, you said, I gave you one word, and you said predictable.
Yeah.
If it is predictable, you maybe were the one person in the whole country that thought this was what was going to happen.
Well, I wrote it in my Sun column a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was really because, actually, that I don't think Ed Miliband lost this election. I think he threw it away, and I think they just became so indistinguishable from each other that when the electorate see that, what they do is they vote for the status quo. And that's pretty much, I think, what we're seeing. I mean, there's a couple of shocks, obviously. Ed Balls is a huge shock for me.
Vince
Cable as well, yeah. I didn't see those coming.
Do you agree with that, Janet?
Yeah, I would say so, and I think that what we take from tonight is that the three main parties really need to reinvent themselves, and I don't think that the Tories can be complacent either. I think what we've seen earlier is that UKIP did get a huge amount of votes. How that plays out in the long term, I don't know, but I do think that ordinary people still feel disconnected from the way that politicians act, from the way they talk. And I mean, Jane and I were talking earlier that when we watch the TV debates, the amount of phrases and their terminology comes from such a narrow pool. I mean, it's almost like they were all clones.
They all mould into one. One politician that the voters were certainly drawn to was Nicola Sturgeon. I mean, it's been an extraordinary night, seismic proportions.
The unelected Nicola Sturgeon.
Of course.
I mean, phenomenal. And you know, it does teach us a lot, I think, about how to incite passion for politics again. But it is really one issue. It's sort of Scotland voting about Scotland. And I think that's quite worrying for us as you know, the UK as a whole.
I think also we've got to understand that Scotland isn't one group of people who all care about one issue. There will be a lot of people north of the border this morning who feel that they're not adequately represented. And, you know, Nicola Sturgeon is a charismatic politician, but she doesn't speak for 100% of Scotland. And what has bothered me in this campaign is seeing the way that certain sections of the SNP have behaved towards the opposition, particularly to someone like Jim Murphy, who is a pretty decent guy. To see him shouted down in public like that wasn't democracy. It's not the kind of democracy that I'm comfortable with.
And it's not the democracy that Nicola Sturgeon would endorse either, of course.
No, but the SNP in the past have been quite slow to condemn those people.
Either way, they are the voice that's shouting loudest north of the border. Janet, Jane, thank you very much for the time being. Over here we have some more celebrity voters. We'll start with you, if you may, Anthony, on the end there. You're a Conservative Party voter. Yep. What did you make of the campaign?
Well, I was actually a bit shocked. I mean, I actually been telling everyone I thought Labour would get in possibly on the back of the SNP, not necessarily join forces, but rely on them for voting. But I'm pleasantly surprised. So
how has it happened?
Well, I think it's happened because a lot of the older generation are Tories, and they actually, we were taught as youngsters to keep your politics to yourself. So I think when the national opinion polls went out, the Tories said, I'm not telling you. Why? You've got to wait and see. So I think it's a bit like that. I mean, I think the Tories, it's a status quo as well. You know, we've had insecurities. We've seen the euro drop 4 points in the last 3 or 4 days. It's come back up again now. And people want stability.
The city do love stability. Just very briefly, Richard, because you've come along. It's been a poor night for Labour. You're a member of the Labour Party. You voted Ed Miliband in as a leader. Was that a mistake?
No, I don't think so. I think he's had a very good campaign, and that's what's really sad, that he's done so much better than he has. And losing Ed Balls was just awful. That was a real blow. No, I'm still happy that I voted for Ed. I think Ed wanted to take the party to the left as opposed to David, and he did.
So where does the party go from here?
That's a difficult one.
You can't answer it. Jacqueline, a good night. I mean, as Anthony was saying, the city loves stability. You're a businesswoman. From that perspective, it's got to be positive.
You know, absolutely. I think for me, it's very much about the economy. And, of course, you know, we all want, you know, better healthcare. We want better education. We want more jobs. We want all of these things. But to have that, you have to have a strong economy to achieve it.
OK, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I know that, Brian, you're commiserating as well, because it didn't go your way, but we appreciate you coming along and sharing your thoughts.
Didn't go the animals' way, that's for sure.
It didn't go the animals' way.
We have a government who will bring back fox hunting and will continue slaughtering badgers. So that's what you got, folks. That's what you voted
for. We're going to find out exactly what they planned. Appreciate your comments this morning. Thank you very much to Janet and Jane as well for joining us. Back to Susanna and Tom.
Yeah, Ben, thanks ever so much. So let's talk to former Conservative MP Edwina Currie and former Labour MP Baroness Una King and former Liberal Democrat MP Chris Huhne. Very good morning to you all. Well, Edwina, what will a Conservative government mean?
A Conservative government will mean that the country is well run, that we will continue to tackle the deficit and get it down.
Now, tackling the deficit, does that mean people can expect significant cuts to things like welfare?
I think the plan is that most of the change is going to be from tax revenues coming in. That's what tends to happen. Excuse me, I've done so much talking and so much cheering during the night that my voice is going completely. It means that the plan and the hope is that the tax revenues go up as the tax rates come down, and that's certainly been happening in the last year or so. So there is a certain amount of leeway. But also, the party went to the polls, the Conservative Party went to the polls being quite clear. There will have to be further cuts, and those cuts are going to have to be quite substantial in order to widen that gap between being on benefits and being in work.
Sorry to bring you down to earth, but you know as well as I do what a minority government is like. How long...
Looks like we're actually going to win.
No. But what a minority government would be like. We had something like 15, 16 by-elections in the last Parliament. What date do you put it? What date would you pick that this government is going to lose its majority? Because it's not going to be very long.
Look, the country still needs a strong government, and I'm sure that Chris, as a Lib Dem, would take on board exactly what I mean by this. Still needs a strong government, still running a big deficit, still not running a trade surplus like Germany is. There's still a hell of a lot of work to do, and we can't go backward on this. We have to continue to go forward. We have to continue to run the country as well as possible, and to make sure that we get to the stage where we have economic surpluses all over the place.
Una, your voice might be cracking for a different reason this morning, because you've lost some very big names.
We certainly have. I mean, obviously, as a Labour person, I'm devastated by the result if we get the trajectory that it looks like we've got. I'm sad for a lot of reasons. You know, there are so many reasons. I mean, for a start, negative campaigning seems to have won. Then we've got the fact that nationalism has been whipped up and is now out of all control and could break up our country and will be out of the EU, and our economy may be decimated. So, you know, there are so many reasons.
Apart from that, it's a bright morning.
Yeah, apart from that, all good. My heart bleeds for Edwina's sore throat. What can I say?
Chris Huhne, meanwhile, your own leader faces... You know, I mean, his future hangs by a thread, doesn't it?
Well, it's been an appalling night for the Lib Dems, and there's obviously going to have to be a lot of thinking about what went wrong and how to put it right and how to reconnect with a lot of our supporters.
Well,
but I think one of the things
might have been the biggest mistake.
Well, actually, there have been examples of successful coalitions, even in the UK. So, for example, when Jim Wallace led the Scottish Liberal Democrats into coalition in the first term of the Scottish Parliament, we emerged from that coalition with an increase in support. So I think it was more political mistakes which were made in dealing with this particular coalition and with this particular campaign. But I would pick up what Una said. I think that the biggest single change in this election, the really worrying thing, is that because of the electoral system, we have doubled the number of SNP MPs. So the reality is, for example, the SNP got fewer votes than the Liberal Democrats, but they're going to have 56 MPs. The Liberal Democrats had 7.5% of the votes, nearly double the number of votes of the SNP, and yet will only have 8. UKIP had 12.5%, even more than either of them, and will have only 1.
Before we get on
and this is frankly just crazy. And of course,
before we go on to electoral reform, before we get on to that, I just want to ask you one quick question. No.
The cost for Edwina is going to be the end of the union.
This is a different debate. Hello. One quick question to you and one quick question to Una. Next leaders of Nick Clegg's not going to survive.
Well, I suspect
Ed Miliband's not going to survive, so who's it going to be?
Well, we'll have to see who the runners and riders are, but Norman Lamb was re-elected and would be a very good leader. Tim Farron was re-elected and would be a very good leader. Those would be two obvious runners.
Una?
I don't know, unless an announcement has been made, you know, just now. We haven't heard that Ed Miliband is standing down. I passionately supported Ed Miliband because I thought he brought the right policies. But the point is, Edwina, you know, it's their job to ask me to, you know, to start putting runners and riders forward. I'm not at that stage. I want to know what the British people have finally, ultimately said, and then we'll decide. What we do know is that every independent pundit said Ed Miliband had a good campaign. We know that was the feeling on the ground. And so, you know, we have... No, absolutely right, which is why I'm saying I want to hear what the voters say in total, and then we'll have that conversation.
All right. Thank you, all of you, very much indeed. Welcome to Good Morning Britain election 2015, and what's turning out to be one of the most dramatic mornings in a generation.
David Cameron is inching towards a second term as Prime Minister. He might have got there, really, one would say by now. Dozens of results are still to come in, though, but the Conservatives look like they're going to have a small majority.
It has been a disastrous time for Labour. Ed Balls in the last hour lost his seat to the Tories, the biggest scalp yet.
Labour has been hit extremely hard in Scotland too, losing all but one of their seats to Nicola Sturgeon's SNP.
And the Liberal Democrats have seen their worst defeat in 3 decades, with Nick Clegg's future as leader hanging in the balance.
What does all this mean for our Parliament?
What deals are going to be made?
And what does it mean for you?
We'll bring you everything you need to know.
Friday, 8th of May, live from ITV Studios. This is Good Morning Britain, Election 2015, with Tom Bradby and Susanna Reid.
Hello and welcome to the Good Morning Britain Elections special. ITV News political editor Tom Bradby alongside me this morning. We are expecting Ed Miliband to be arriving at Labour Party headquarters very shortly, so we're keeping an eye, obviously, on that, and we'll bring you his arrival and anything he might possibly say as soon as we get it. Kate Garraway is there for us this morning. She says the mood is extremely gloomy. What do you make of what's been happening, Tom?
Well, I think, as we've said earlier in the programme, it's been an extraordinary night from the moment we got that exit poll, which was a bit of a shock to all of us and a bit of a shock to everyone around this table, I suspect, and to everyone else. And we've then gone through a series of extraordinary nights. But, I mean, I think the point is that even this morning, quite bizarre things in the normal political run of events are happening. Ed Balls losing his seat. I didn't actually, I've got to be honest, see that coming at all. I didn't see Vince Cable losing his seat coming. And those are big moments, as we've said. Ed Balls, a man who's served at the highest levels of politics for many, many years, still a young man, political career possibly over. It's a brutal business.
However, a really good night, obviously, for the Conservative Party, and we've seen David Cameron going back through the door of number 10 Downing Street this morning, and he is going to be going to meet the Queen at Buckingham Palace around lunchtime.
And as we said, wouldn't you like to be a fly on the wall for that conversation? We could war game what they might say, but I think that might get us into a lot of trouble. Tempting, though it is.
Darren Rivers, meanwhile, has the latest on the election results so far.
Back in number 10, and for all the predictions and polls suggesting a hung parliament, David Cameron is due to speak to the Queen about forming a government at 12:30 today, after a night of extraordinary drama.
This is clearly a very strong night for the Conservative Party. I think we've had a positive response to a positive campaign.
This morning, Tory heavyweights were digesting the shock results.
Put it this way, you know, there was a big smile on my face when the exit poll came through, and then when some of the results started coming through to confirm the exit poll, the smile stayed there.
And the smile must have got broader when he heard this.
18,776.
Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls defeated by 422 votes.
Any personal disappointment I have at this result is as nothing compared to the sense of sorrow I have at the result that Labour has achieved across the United Kingdom.
It made for a grim night for Ed Miliband. Labour annihilated in Scotland. His position now seems untenable.
Miliband, Ed, Labour Party, 20,708 votes.
I'm deeply sorry for what has happened. And I also want to say that the next government has a huge responsibility. It has a huge responsibility in facing the very difficult task of keeping our country together.
His loss was her gain. Nicola Sturgeon had a distinct swagger as it became clear the SNP had pulled off one of the most spectacular coups in British electoral history. SNP scalps included a brace of Alexanders, Douglas Alexander, Labour's Shadow Foreign Secretary, and Danny Alexander, the Lib Dem Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Labour's leader in Scotland, Jim Murphy, was also out, as was former Lib Dem leader Charles Kennedy.
What we are witnessing here in Scotland is a historic shift in the political firmament.
By the time Nick Clegg arrived at his Sheffield Hallam count, his party had been devastated, and he only narrowly hung on to his seat after a strong challenge from Labour.
That Nick Clegg has been duly elected. Thank you.
It is now painfully clear that this has been a cruel and punishing night for the Liberal Democrats.
one he said had implications for his position in the party. Vince Cable among those swept aside by a wave of hostility towards the coalition partners after 18 years as MP for Twickenham. And Simon Hughes, another high-profile Lib Dem casualty, stunning defeats that have left the party reeling. David Cameron has thrived while the Labour and Lib Dem leaders look unlikely to survive for long in this remarkable election, whose result few predicted. Dan Rivers, Good Morning Britain.
Well, 25 counts left, including Thanet South, which, of course, is
They're keeping us waiting down there, aren't they?
Nigel Farage, UKIP leader, is waiting to hear whether he has secured a seat as an MP. Meanwhile, Sue Jameson is at Downing Street for us. Very good morning to you, Sue. So, well, it's a shock result, frankly, isn't it, this morning? This is not what the polls were telling us. We were told that Labour and the Conservatives were neck and neck, and that the likely thing we would be talking about this morning was whether Labour and the SNP would be doing some kind of deal for a new coalition government. Meanwhile, it looks like the Conservatives are going to be able to govern alone.
That's right, all those undecided voters maybe going into the booth at the last minute. David Cameron was always confident, but I'm told even he didn't expect a result like this, which is why just a short while ago he was speaking to the Conservative Party faithful at headquarters and told them it was the sweetest victory of them all. So at 12:30 he's going to leave here, go to Buckingham Palace, where he'll be invited to form the new government, and he'll agree. It's going to be a short meeting, we know that, because we are expecting him back here at around about 1 o'clock, where he will make that formal declaration. I imagine the lectern will come out of number 10 for that. And if David Cameron didn't see it that good, I bet Ed Miliband didn't see such a bad result coming as well. There is going to be so much soul-searching within the Labour Party now. The people who said, well, his personal poll results were always horrible, perhaps he shouldn't have been leader in the first place. And we know that Ed Balls, I mean, that was such a shock, wasn't it, has already started to throw his weight behind his wife's leadership campaign. I don't think there's any doubt at all that he will go. And as for the Lib Dems, well, you used to have to book a room for their Christmas party. Now you can fit them all round one table. And I don't think that Nick Clegg is going to be around that table for very long. If he is not going to be the leader, maybe, as Paddy Ashdown was hinting to us earlier, maybe he will leave politics altogether. I mean, you can hear the crashing sound of political careers around me.
Can't you just? Yeah, Sue, thanks so much. Sue Jameson there at Downing Street. So, the SNP, one of the other big stories of the night, of course, in the morning, Tom, doing really, really well.
Yes, and I think the big question is what that means for us, really. We've talked a little bit about this morning, but we could conceivably have another referendum on the Union in the next few years. We will almost certainly have a referendum on the European Union and our position in it, so brace yourselves.
Yes, of course, the SNP all but wiped Labour out in Scotland, and Lorraine is in Glasgow this morning. Morning, Lorraine.
Good morning to you. Yeah, what a night for the SNP. We keep saying it. 56 MPs, including, of course, Alex Salmond, on his way to Westminster. But I was talking to the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, earlier on, and she was very firm about the fact that she is the one in control. Very firm about that indeed. Disaster, of course, for Labour, who've just got one MP. Now, I'm surrounded by voters, have been all morning, obviously. And Annika Blake, you voted SNP.
I did, yeah.
Why did you vote for SNP?
The last time the elections rolled around, I was a student, and I don't know if duped is the right word, but I did go Lib Dem,
right,
and then immediately felt betrayed. I think that Nick Clegg came across incredibly weak. I think even the fact that he then apologised, it just made it worse for me personally.
So you were disaffected by the Lib Dems and hence went to SNP?
And I was looking for a strong leader, a strong party, and I think in Scotland there's really no other choice. If you want someone who's going to stand up for you, who's not going to back down, who's not going to fall under pressure. I think Nicola Sturgeon, Alex Salmond before her, Nicola Sturgeon now, both brilliant leaders.
And yet she is the one person that nobody could vote for, not even up here.
Well, I know, it was quite
election.
depressing, but she is the person who's holding the party together right now. I think when you look at the MPs that we do have, they are strong because they have a strong leader. And I think any party that has such a strong leader is going to automatically appeal to more voters.
Well, Lila's with us as well. Lila Davison, you voted SNP too. Why?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's very much a moral issue on Trident, which obviously the Conservative and Labour are for the renewal. And also the consensus in Scotland is that it's time for change from the old middle class, privately educated men in Westminster. So definitely that, and We need more women in politics, more people who actually connect with their constituents, and I feel the SNP do that very well.
Well, let me just talk very, very briefly. Let's just go over here and talk to Katie Gaboggy-Swan, who's a political blogger. Now, it's very interesting. Massive turnout in Scotland. It was very, very high, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
People are, I think, post-referendum, very much engaged in politics and very interested in it here.
They are. I mean, I think that one of the fundamental misunderstandings in the rest of the UK is that this is a purely nationalist SNP movement. And if you look at the groundwork that's been put in the past 2 years, the energy that's come from the referendum, it wasn't just the SNP campaign, and there were a lot of other groups. For example, the Greens and my own organisation, Commonweal. There were many different voices campaigning in that bubble. So now what you have is an energised electorate, a very educated electorate who understand and feel the power behind their vote and want to go out and use it. And for example, just a snapshot, Commonweal was an organisation that started as a small idea, a very small team. We started as an official organisation in October, and now we have more than 57 local groups with hundreds of volunteers across Scotland. The engagement is maintained despite the end of the referendum.
Okay, Kate, thank you very much indeed. Back to you.
Lorraine, thank you. An SNP political landslide up there in Scotland. 13 minutes past 9, still to come. Ben's with the people who decided the results of the election, the voters.
Yeah, our mums, they were undecided going into the election. They've had 17 pints of coffee. They've eaten their body weight in pastries. Lisa, before you went in, who did you vote for last time?
Lib Dem.
Who did you want to vote for this time, or who did you vote for?
I wanted to vote Green, but I went for Lib Dem in a tactical vote.
In a tactical vote, OK. Louise?
Conservative previously, Conservative this time.
Why Conservative?
Mainly because for childcare that they'll do, and because I didn't want UKIP to get in.
OK. Jane?
Lib Dem last time, Labour this time for the NHS.
OK. And then to you, Louise, up in Scotland, of course?
Labour last time and SNP this time because they were the only party that was really anti-austerity measures.
And that's one of the factors for you. And Cam?
Conservative Party last time and Conservative again. I felt very comfortable with the Conservative Party again. OK, there you go. That's what our undecided voters were thinking. We're going to come back after the break and talk more to some people here to understand exactly what's been going on in this extraordinary election. Also, we understand the former Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls will be arriving very shortly at Labour HQ. We'll see you in a bit.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, well, there have been a few surprises in the general election results, and Ranveer has the latest.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Yes, David Cameron will see the Queen at Buckingham Palace at 12:30 today to ask to form a new government. The Conservatives are on course to have a predicted Commons majority of possibly 8. In the last hour, the Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls has lost his seat. He was ousted by the Tories. Ed Miliband's future as Labour leader is under intense scrutiny after what he conceded had been a very disappointing and difficult result. A dramatic night, meanwhile, saw the Scottish National Party sweep Labour out of almost all of its strongholds north of the border. Nick Clegg's leadership, meanwhile, of the Liberal Democrats could also be drawing to a close after a disastrous night for his party. And Nigel Farage has confirmed he will resign as UKIP leader if he fails to win his South Thanet seat. That result is expected in the next couple of hours.
All right, Ranveer, thanks very much indeed. Let's get the last word from Ben, who's on the River Thames with some famous faces this morning. Morning, Ben.
Morning, Susanna. Look, the sun is trying to break through these clouds. It's probably been quite a murky picture across the evening as we've watched the results coming slowly but surely, becoming clearer and clearer. What a successful night's been for the Tories, and what an awful night, Richard, sadly, it's been for your beloved Labour.
Not been a great night for Labour, no. But it's not been a terrible night, but there are big names we've lost, which have been very, very disappointing.
In terms of going forwards, Ed Miliband, it looks like, you know, is his leadership sustainable for much longer?
Well, as I said earlier, he did run a very good campaign, and I thought he was getting stronger and stronger and more prime ministerial. I hope he stays, but I don't know if he can.
If you could pick a leader to take over, who would you like to see?
Ed Balls.
We have a problem there as well, don't we, Richard? We'll leave Richard to commiserate a little bit longer. Jacqueline Gold and Anthony Worrell-Thompson, much more positive from your perspective. Yeah. You're both Tory supporters. One thing I wanted to ask you, though, Jacqueline, the impressive nature with which Nicola Sturgeon has gone about this campaign. It's been incredible to watch.
It has, and you know,
I don't agree with her policies, but I think she's been very impressive on that centre stage. And I think what set her apart from the other parties is that she has really engaged directly with the people, and I think that's something perhaps the other parties will want to learn from.
I think it's a little bit unfair, though, when they're getting only 7% of the vote of the whole country, and they're getting 56, 58 seats, whatever it is. I mean, I also feel very sorry for UKIP, even though I'm a Tory. 12% of the votes and 1 seat.
Did you ever expect to hear yourself say that, Anthony?
I didn't, but I do think we have to look at our electoral structure here.
And see how that goes. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Really appreciate your input. You can go home and have a stiff drink and get yourself through it.
OK, thanks.
Just quickly want to show you one thing. I want to say thank you very much to our mums who've been here all morning. You've been absolutely fabulous. Thank you for letting us follow your journey. But particularly, these are the 2 stars for me. This is Eva and Jamie, because mums come with their kids and they've been really fantastic all morning, haven't you guys? And look, this is what's got them through. Chocolate biscuits, Susanna.
That's you.
Oh, chocolate biscuits will get you through anything. Ben, thanks very much indeed.
This election's going to take some explaining, isn't it, to the next generation?
Let's talk to Gordon Brown's former Special Advisor Damien McBride, Nick Clegg's former Special Advisor Sean Kemp and Fiona Cunningham, former Special Advisor to Theresa May. Very good morning to you all. Fiona, what does this mean for those who voted? What will a slim majority Conservative government mean for the rest of us?
Well, I mean, I don't think you can just look at it through that prism. I mean, I think the country today is completely different, and I don't think it'll ever be the same again. For the Conservatives, obviously, they've had a good night, and the PM's off to see the Queen, so that's positive. But, you know, we have the problem now of what to do with Scotland. Scotland is SNP, and that is a constitutional issue for anyone in Westminster.
Meanwhile, Damien, what does this mean for Ed Miliband?
Well, I mean, Ed Miliband had been planning this. The unexpected nature of this result is such. Ed Miliband had been planning, I think at 11 o'clock today, to stand up and make a speech about the terms of a coalition deal that he would be prepared to do. And, of course, that's not going to happen now. He'd probably have to use that speech instead to resign. And that's the scale of how unexpected this was for Labour and why that devastation is so huge for Labour this morning.
Who's the next leader, do you think?
I think they'll skip a generation and go to the intake that came in at 2010. People that aren't tainted by that sort of long period of Blair Brown government, not people that built up the deficit, which has been a millstone around their neck during this campaign.
Would you pick someone in particular?
Well, I'd be looking at Chuka Umunna as the favourite.
OK.
Sean? I mean, Sean, can we ask you the same question about the Lib Dems?
I would have thought Tim Farron is the favourite. I mean, of the crowded field, there is people who might run for next to Liberal Democrats. Tim Farron and Norman Lamb, the two I'd imagine would run, and Tim would be the favourite.
Yeah, I mean, there's no chance that Nick Clegg can stay on as leader.
I don't think there is at all, and I don't think Nick would expect to be honest, after a result this disappointing.
And we're talking, you know, obviously we're talking politically, and we're saying, you know, this morning politics is extremely brutal. There must have been moments in the night where you actually felt quite emotional.
I mean, there were moments where I was actually speechless. I mean, you know, when the exit polls came in and I saw the Lib Dems down to 10, you know, I really didn't know what to do with that, really. And as the night went on and we saw big hitters, you know, people who we've grown up with, I mean, they were my kind of political history, and they've gone. And all these new people are about to arrive. Yeah. And it really feels quite a seismic change, actually, in the whole political landscape.
You know that thing politicians say about the voters being the boss?
Yes.
Which they never really quite mean most of the time, and then last night and this morning it's like, wow.
No, it's a really brutal reminder. And, of course, these are people, if you work in politics, they're your friends, you've got to get loyal to them, so it can be quite upsetting to watch.
Yeah.
Well, thanks ever so much for joining us this morning. That is all from us on Good Morning Britain, a morning which produced a result that next to no one expected. Some of Britain's most famous political faces ousted from the House of Commons, their careers lying in tatters.
In the next few hours, David Cameron will go to Buckingham Palace to ask the Queen if he can form a government. We'll hand you back to Alistair Stewart at ITV.